I saw them.
I'll give a deal. I don't want them.
I bought different ones already, so I'm not in the market.
Well, if you know anybody, just let me know. They're brand new.
$10.
Well, I can't go that far.
I'll pay for them right now.
I got divorced.
$12. Final offer.
And
We said 38 and under 12.
we're stopping there.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, I'm out.
We're live on YouTube.
When did Terry,
Go on.
that's right, sent the updated agenda, right?
What's that?
She sent the updated agenda.
This goes off at 7 o'clock, Todd, because
Thought
I have a
I thought I
stamp.
saw.
It reminds me of something I have to do every day at 7. It is 7.
Good evening. Today is Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024. This is a special Board of Selectmen meeting. Before we start, I'd like to thank Bob Geiger for his work on the budget and his 7 months service as interim town manager. With that, call to order.
Stephen Sudlack.
Troy Lemire.
Paul Marino?
Paul Harrington?
Todd Orshalashi.
Glenn Albanesius.
William Hester.
Andy Perez.
William Pozo.
Item 2, consider and possibly act on the town manager's proposed budget for fiscal year 2025.
Excellent. I guess before we really start, I know I said Paul Harrington, but Paul Harrington, the new town manager here. I know this is probably the first time I'm on YouTube TV, so hello, everybody. I'm looking forward to meeting everybody, but with that said, we got some work to do tonight, so I want to share what myself, Anne Marie, and Tom put together today, which was a 1, 2, 3, going this way. It's a little bit of a revision of the last budget you all looked at. So I want to start off and I guess tell the story, paint the picture that we had a few things that happened this year, and it's no different in any other town. Our grand list did take a drop. And when grand lists drop, used car prices obviously came down a little bit. So we lost about $600,000 in revenue. Just from year over year, before we even look at possibly any new budget items, just to get even, we would almost have to come up $600,000 in revenue just to keep an even playing field. So I want to keep that in mind as we work through this budget and as we talk about this budget. But we had a grand list drop, and then we had ARPA dollars that are just drying up. So we had to do a couple of things in order to put this budget together. And Bob and the Board of Selectmen did a great job up until this point. They got us to a certain level. And then we sat down yesterday and today, and we really looked and reanalyzed the numbers. The first place that I like to look is revenues. And I always state that it's always easy to pay expenses if you have all of the revenues. So let's re-examine our revenue number. So I'm on this page, the long sheet. The first one, which was a fairly sizable jump, the real estate grand list. In the budget that you all were looking at, we had a 98% collection rate, which is very good. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, your collection rate for real estate taxes hovers around 99.8%. Huge. Part of the reason is that a lot of people will escrow their real estate taxes. So the bank's always going to pay because as a town, we're the first position. So if we ever have to, we can take the house if a bank or an individual doesn't pay that real estate taxes. So tonight I'm proposing that we take the 98% and just slide that up a half a point. Anne Marie, I have that sheet somewhere. What does that give us in dollars? Just that 0.5%? We talked about it today, and oh, please do.
Is it this one? This one doesn't look like it though.
No, it's
Unless something's
no, it
marked.
went down.
I think something's marked.
That's not it.
So,
Is it on the back page here? in
what's the
blue?
question?
So when we went up 0.5% in the real estate grand list, what additional revenue did that give us? this one hasn't been adjusted yet.
So you went from.
We went from 98 to 98 and a half.
Yep. So you went from a 28.84 to 28.81, so just about 300?
So about $300,000 in legitimate historic revenue that the town's been collecting.
Can you say those numbers again, please? 28 what?
So that would bring the mill rate just with the,
No, the 28 what?
28.84 is where we started at with the budget that you have in front of you. If you look at page 1 or page 2 behind the title page, that's your mill rate page. So we're starting at 28.84, correct?
No, what's the property taxes number? You're jumping from 98% to 98.5, so.
So your revenue, so then I gotta go back, hang on,
So
because I didn't
98,
didn't write it down, hold on.
Well, I have the old one.
So the revenue goes up about 300,000.
No, it's not gonna be that
No,
much.
hold on.
So it was
Did-
28,739, 316 the last time? No?
Hold on one second. So you're starting at net tax revenue gross, or budgeted revenue of 28,832,404,
Okay, so that was what we started at.
okay? If we move that to 98.5, hang on, I gotta look at that, because it's moving your mill rate. No, it's actually not gonna change anything. It's gonna change your mill rate, but it's not gonna change the tax dollars that we need. So your tax dollars are still gonna be the same, because your budget is driven by non-tax revenue and expenditures.
You're right,
So you're going to generate the same tax revenue, your tax revenue number that you need to make up for your expenditures. So you have two pieces, tax revenue and non-tax revenue. Your non-tax revenue right now is static before we go into the rest of the line items that Mr. Harrington's gonna talk about. Your tax revenue is gonna stay the same, but what you need to levy on residents is less of a burden, because our collection rate is gonna go up. So we're collecting more taxes, you're still gonna get the same tax revenue, but across the board from the number of tax bills that go out, you're gonna levy less on each tax bill.
Said another way, done this before, said another way is that this is revenue that we're not accounting for, but, so there's this number out there, right? We're gonna collect $28 million in taxes, right? And we think, we're roughly gonna get 98%. But if we say we're gonna get 5 additional, a half a percentage point,
Right.
we have more revenue that we can count on to help offset expenses.
So I think what we're trying to
Correct.
find out is what is that dollar amount?
And
Yes.
that's where I'm going.
Well, that dollar amount is equal to, so your grand list goes up a little bit. So your net dollar amount for your mill rate change goes from 28.94 down to 28.81.
But I think the question is, if there's, the total grand list revenue is X number of dollars, whatever that number is.
So the
maybe
grand list adjustment, it was $843,354,489. Anne Marie, if you could you have Excel?
Say that again, what's
So
that
it
dollar
looked, the
number?
real estate grand list on the first page of the budget document, after the grand list adjustments, we have it at $843,354,489. We were saying we were gonna collect roughly 98% of that. If we take a 0.5% more of 843,354, 489, obviously you gotta take the assessed value, times it by the mill rate. What's the additional 0.5% get us in new income?
So So all it's gonna do is it's gonna bring your grand list dollars up. So it's gonna bring your net grand list, adjusted for collections, up. So
Correct.
your grand list that you have right now is 999,198,713, right?
Total grand list, yeah.
999,198, right?
Total grand.
Adjusted for collections, when you adjust the collection number upward, that brings your grand list up by 4,349,960. So your tax base is $4 million higher. So when you do this, when you don't change your expenditures, to equal that same amount, it brings your mill rate down.
So it's roughly 2.8, let me divide that by 1,000.
So now a mill is no longer 999,198. A mill is now 1,003,549. So the value of 1 mill goes up, but what you need to levy on each individual bill goes down. Does it not make sense?
Anybody not following? I get it, but came
Well,
up with it, so.
I follow it, but in the budget, shouldn't that be reflected over here? in
No, because
property?
it's not gonna change your dollar, the net dollars that you need. So your budget is driven by your total expenditures. So if your total expenditures go up,
Yeah.
now you need to find more tax revenue if your non-tax revenue doesn't change. So if you have to, your starting point is really your total expenditures, and you back into your taxes that you need to levy to get to your expenditure total. So if you don't change your expenditures, and you leave everything else, if you add $100,000 to your expenditures, now you have to find $100,000 more worth of income. The only two places you can find it is tax revenue or non-tax revenue.
So, again, and just try to look at it from a layman's term, right? If there's X number of dollars in possible billed tax revenue,
Yep.
everything on the grand list, if 100% of the people paid the bill, we'd bring in X number of dollars.
Yes.
Previously, we've accounted for just 98% of that, because we
Yep.
believed we would only collect 98%. Now we're thinking we're actually on pace to collect 99% of it, or almost 100% of it, 99.8. So Paul's proposal is let's account for 98.5% of it. That 0.5 equals a certain amount of dollars in revenue, doesn't it?
It does,
Yes.
yes.
And I think Candy's question, and I'm interested to know, was what is that dollar amount? You had said originally that's about $300,000. Is that accurate? It seems like it'd be more than that if it was 0.5 of the total grand list.
Well, remember, you're just looking at the real estate portion of it, which
Right.
is the lion's share of your total
And
grand
it's
list.
not the grand list dollar value, it's the grand list, it's taxes we collect.
So we said
Why
there's,
are we just looking at real estate
excellent point. So we looked at everything. And
and business property?
we looked at it all. So the numbers that are shown on this first page of the budget sheet, when we looked at the elderly homeowners grand list, 98%, we're confident, and that's what historic data has been telling us, that we should leave it at 98%. Motor vehicle grand list is where, unfortunately, there's no real mechanism, and with the state changing the registration laws, people now have 3 years when they renew, or when they register their car, and when they worry about, some people, I don't wanna say all people, where some people really worry about that registration is, oh, I can't re-register my car unless I pay my tax bill. So that has actually dropped since the state changed the law. So we're suggesting we still keep that at the 92.5%. And personal property, historic data tells us roughly 97% as well. Where we're looking and where a lion's share of tax revenue comes from is from the grand list. And historic data is telling us that we're at a collection rate of 99.8%. Great year. We know it's a tough economy out there. Anne Marie and I went back and forth a lot this morning. I was a little bit higher, but, I'm still coming in and learning, the town as much as I can, and we agree that we should raise that 0.5 point. And that's gonna say that the revenue that's out there, we're gonna collect more of it to help us offset our expenses.
I mean, I think it's fair to say what it does to the mill rate, but it'd be interesting to know what the dollar amount is. What's that
I think she's probably
0.5%?
Well, I'm trying to
She's gonna figure.
For
I
some
figured
reason,
that's
mill
what she
rate
was doing.
is my
So
Achilles
just
heel.
one thing that I think we should also make sure that we talk about as we start to make all these adjustments is next year.
Correct.
Okay, so this year we're taking 2 million out of our fund balance.
Yep.
To put towards capital expenses, which means we reduce the amount of, let's say, property taxes that were fed into this year's budget, okay? So when we start to use up the 99% and the 100% in terms of our revenue, one of the rays that we've been generating, I think you'll see generating surpluses over the past bunch of years, is because there has been some room in the budget in case we didn't collect it, and if we were lucky with revenues, then it went into the general fund for our savings account. As we tighten down this budget more, and as we're taking more money to pay for things that the property taxes once paid for, when we get to next year, and everybody remember this, when we get to next year, if we don't have a surplus at the end of this year to fill back up the piggy bank, but the year after that as well, you're gonna have to really hit economic development on those businesses.
Candy, I can't agree with you more. I think as we move through the presentation, I'm already looking at the potential loading up of the coffers when this budget year closes on June 30th.
Yep.
In fact, yesterday alone, when I sat with Tom, we're gonna look at this investment income
Yep.
line item, which we've absolutely blown out of the water to the point where in this year's budget that ends June 30th, we had a $60,000 number. I'm happy to report, as of yesterday, that account where you all budgeted 60,000, and nobody has a crystal ball. Right now, that account's at $540,000.
Right.
Which is great. So we're looking at, where things are moving and where we can go. The good news is if we move our collection rate to 98.5%, I would also next year stress that we should keep it at 98.5%, because that's our grand list, especially on the real estate, because we've just went through, the revalve. That's not gonna change. We're saying we're gonna continue to collect at a high rate of collection at 98.5.
Right.
And again, I was at 99. I'm gonna be honest with you. Anne Marie goes, this is how we've protected our town, Paul.
Yep.
And this is how we've gotten some surpluses. So that's why I was talked into presenting the 98.5%, just sliding it up that
And
half
if you
point.
use all the interest income in this budget.
Nope, not
no,
planning to do that. Oh, yep,
If we did,
yep,
then we would have a hole for next
For
year.
next year.
If the feds cut
yep,
the interest rates, and we're not getting the 4 or 5%
Yep.
that we used to get, then we're gonna create more holes.
yes.
So, well, for right now, it will be, hey, let's find our way out and have a lower mill rate. You'll
You
be
know-
sitting, the same people sitting here right now will be sitting here next spring.
Yep.
So we're leaving 1.3% from actual to estimated, right? So we do have a little bit of a cushion in there.
Right.
And I realize it's,
Your actual year-to-date is close to the 98.5. Your year-to-date is
98.8 to be exact.
98 point,
It was 98.8.
98,
No, 99.8.
98.67 is your current. So the tax collector does this on a monthly basis. Real estate collected is at 98.67 right now.
And if we look at the historical runs of it, that's where I got the 99.8. Because obviously the fiscal year's not over yet. People are still, in fact, I walked down here today and there was a line outside the tax office. I love seeing a line outside tax offices. Not always the best that people have to wait, but that means we're getting revenue, so.
do we know what that dollar amount was? Did we ever
So
figure that out?
you're really, I don't know, I guess maybe I have a mental block here, because you're really not going to generate more revenue, because you're going to levy less taxes on each individual. So by saying you are going to collect more, your grand list, your base grand list that you're basing your budget off of is going up. So your mill rate is calculated based on the expenditures, and what you've got for non-tax revenue, and what your grand list is. So when you do that calculation, you say, I need this amount, and what mill rate is gonna get me that amount of revenue. The amount of revenue you're looking to generate is not going to change. How you're going to get to that is by levying less on each individual bill. So the revenue you're gonna bring in, I understand the question, but it doesn't give you $1 figure because it's just the base of your calculation. The base of your calculation is now higher than what it is. So now, to get to the same dollar value, you are simply levying less taxes on each individual.
So let me ask the question a different way.
I probably can't give you a different answer.
You might actually be able to, no, this one, just 1 second real quick. So for getting the dollar value, the half a point does what to the mill?
It brings it from 28.94, which is your starting point, correct?
Starting when? The last time we were all here?
The one that we worked off of the last budget,
Okay,
right?
so
So we're always
20
starting with the last version of the budget. So the last version was the April 10th, which brought, your expenditures were 41,457,20, and your tax revenue is the 28,832, which is not going to change, and your non-tax revenue is the 12 million. So this page that you received, this short little page, that's your starting point in the left-hand column, 28.94. So the proposed increase was 2.55. When you change that collection rate, that brings your base up, that brings your mill rate down to 28.81, which instead of being a 2.55 increase, is a 2.42 increase.
All right, so we've relieved some of the increase, marginal, but we've relieved some of the
Correct.
increase. with
I
the
have your
addition.
number.
Okay.
Okay, so let me walk you into the number, okay? So we're just looking at the real estate. I needed to sit down with my calculator, my pen, and just do it. So if you look at the $843 million, and I'm gonna just throw out numbers roughly, just so everyone's following along. It's the real estate grand list. That's the grand list. We obviously have to take 70% of it, right? So that brings it down to roughly $590 million. Then we have to times it by 8, and I used a 26.39 mill rate. I had to use a mill rate because it's how you're going to get a number, but you'll see as you change the mill rate, that number changes. If you collected 98% of that $590 million of real estate grand list, you would roughly collect $15,267,701. If you tick that up a half a point, instead of that number I just read, you are now going to collect $15,345,597. So roughly, and I didn't write this number down, but it's still in my calculator, roughly about $78,000 in income that I truly believe that we will collect, we should account for, and it does allow us to potentially collect more and to also, put money into, our general fund at the end of the year. So roughly $78,000. That's going to move as your mill rate moves because I had to use a number, so I used 26.39. If you have a higher mill rate, you're obviously gonna collect more money off of that. If you have a lower mill rate, you collect less. But I know where you guys wanted to go, and I figured that out upstairs, and I apologize. It's on a different piece of paper, but roughly $78,000 in income. How's that?
Right, so on this page,
Okay?
if you recalculate it later on to 98.5 over to this right column,
Yep,
then we have the numbers on the grand list over here,
yep.
because it's right now at 98%.
Right, so your grand list total, your grand list adjusted for collections for real estate would go to 847,657,318.
Yep.
Your elderly homeowners would go to 13,646,259. Your motor vehicle would not change, your personal property would not change. Your BAA final would go to 4,361,459. So your adjusted total would be $1,003,548,673. And that is the base that you now would use to calculate your mill rate.
Came out of the back. Well, I had to give you that was the easy one.
All we needed was a 78, you know.
I wanted to get you
That's
there.
all we
so.
needed.
Now, what is the board's pleasure? Do you want to take one each line by line? Do you want to wait until the end, do them all? Again, new guy, so I want to,
So the process would be that, I think it would be good for you to walk us through all the lines.
Do that.
And then we go back and start motioning each line, because I think we need to have each line motioned.
I'm okay with that. Let's go down. We're good on the real estate?
We understand.
We understand. Going down to.
Thank you, Andrew.
Going down to the motor vehicle collection rate, we again looked at historical data, and we're gonna actually recommend that we raise that up to $225,000 in motor vehicle supplemental. It's been left at that $200,000 line item for how many years, Anne Marie? It was,
Was only budgeted as a separate line item starting in fiscal '23.
so it only started as a separate line item in fiscal '23, which a lot of people buy cars throughout the year, and they're gonna get a bill in January. We should be accounting for that revenue. So last year we did it. It was a number that, nobody really, zeroed in on, but we're suggesting and looking at the data. Right now, I can tell you that motor vehicle supplemental was $240,000 collected to date.
I'm gonna pull it up right now, just so we,
So this is not correct. Based on what you're saying on this white sheet.
for what do you mean?
Here's the issue, and I agree with you. If you look at the 11/30/23 data, that's where that's came from.
No, but I should look at this for numbers, not this. Is this where I'm getting confused?
Yeah,
We're looking
don't
at
look
this.
at
So
that.
you're
I feel
starting
like I'm
with, that's
getting
the number
confused.
you're starting with, so that has no changes in it.
So this is
The
where we
budget that
were.
you're looking at
All right,
only has the line item, that is the last budget that you agreed on, because you haven't agreed on any changes. No changes have gone through that budget. Until you agree on any changes,
Got it.
then the budget, so that is only given to you to highlight the line items that are
Got it.
on that schedule.
Yeah, and what I wanted to do is we wanted to give you guys a one-pager
Good.
to look at it, and I should have stated that at the beginning. We're
okay.
still learning each other, so, motor vehicle supplemental, and I didn't look at the numbers as of 11/30, where a lot of, when you were looking at your budget, you were looking at numbers that were just as of 11/30. Well, a lot of things happened between November 30th and now the end of April. So I looked at numbers up until yesterday. We had a report pulled. We feel confident that already we've collected $240,000 as of yesterday in motor vehicle supplemental. We feel that we could take an additional $25,000 in revenue and tack it onto the motor vehicle supplemental.
And you all have the March 31st numbers in the financial reports that I gave you. So if you look at the budget, monthly budget versus actual summary, you have up through the end of March numbers in your records already, so.
Any questions on motor vehicle? Moving down to interest and liens, we're gonna recommend an additional $5,000 addition to that line. Just again, looking at historical actuals. We're not budgeting at the historical actuals, we're budgeting a little bit less, we're budgeting more on the conservative side. Just in case, market changes and anything like that, we're gonna recommend, and when you're in a budget crisis, $5,000 changes things. And I looked at, $1,000 items, $5,000 items. So one of our other recommendations is that we change the interest and liens from 160 to 165. I believe in truthful in budgeting. The social services grant of $50,000, I can't get confirmation on that. We shouldn't include it in our budget. So I am gonna come before you tonight and recommend that we pull out the $50,000 in the social services grant. Later on, you'll hear about a different funding source, but that would be a recommendation that I cannot get you all a confirmation that that grant exists or is going to continue to exist. So I feel more safe getting it out of the budget, and we're not counting on money that's simply not going to come. Any questions? Building permits. This one may be a little bit of a lengthier conversation. I met with the building department. We haven't changed our permit fees in well over 20 years. The building department has a proposal that we could readily, get before you and get enacted before July 1st. If those building fees were in effect past July, we would have collected roughly $225,000 in permit fees this year alone. We're actually not recommending, although we hope we're gonna have a lot more economic activity, we hope we get a lot more permits pulled, but we're gonna budget a little conservative and suggest that we take on before July 1st, we change our building permit fees, and we add an additional $75,000 to the building permit fee line. Again, this is an item that has not changed. We all know that costs have significantly increased over the last 20 years. And when pulling a building permit, that, not that we wanna go out and gouge, and we're really not, but a little bit in every single permit does add up to a significant amount of money at the end of the year. Investment on income, you heard me talk about it a little bit earlier. To date, we have well over $540,000 in the investment income line of this year's budget. We budgeted $60,000. We were gonna budget $200,000 in the original budget. We're gonna suggest that we raise that up to $350,000. Nowhere near, obviously, the $600,000 that we're gonna collect this year. Again, keeping possibly a potential surplus. Even if the Fed comes in and drops rates, they're not gonna go, pre-2020 rates, pre-COVID rates. Interest rates are still gonna remain relatively higher than they were when we were collecting $60,000 to $80,000. Moving on, recreational revenue. That's the account that Parks and Rec have. We're suggesting instead of $20,000, we take an additional $15,000 out of that account to help offset, obviously, some of the costs that go along with running the Parks and Rec department. Last but not, or two more items to transfer in the economic stabilization. If you look at this current year budget that we're in, and I want to get the exact number, we did create a hole. And it's hard when you're faced with a budget. In this year's budget, last year you all approved $663,629 out of the Economic Stabilization Fund. It's hard to have that much money and then go to zero. We do have to lean ourselves off of it. So I'm suggesting that we use $200,000, and next year hoping to use none of it. But again, when we're in the budget crisis that we're in, I am gonna suggest that we use $200,000 out of that account to help lean us off of it, to help, get us through the budget process. But that's another recommendation that, we came up with today when we sat down.
Will there be any money left in it?
Yes, there, let me go to Candy and then I'll go to Troy, but first I'm going to Anne Marie because she has the sheet open.
I do?
I thought you did.
I do
We
not.
looked at it earlier.
No, we didn't look at the balance on that.
Oh, I thought we did. We looked at a lot of balances.
Oh, well,
and
you can
stuff.
give me the balance afterwards, keep
Okay.
going.
Troy, sorry.
I'm just wondering,
easier when I'm
what is that economic? I never even heard of that before. If you
So
could-
that's a separate fund that was created last year when we had budgeted for debt service, when we thought we were going to go out to bond earlier on the road bond. So we took surplus that was from the 22, I'm trying to think, from the 22 budget, and we moved that into the economic stabilization. And then when we went out to bond for the first tranche of the bond that we did last April, when we sold the bonds, we got a premium. So out in the market, people will pay a premium. That premium comes to us. We could either book it as revenue right off the bat, or we can keep that as to offset our debt service at a future point in time. And that's what we did. We expect that we'll probably end up with an additional premium the next time we go out to bond additionally, but we don't know what that number's gonna be.
One of the things that GFOA really likes, two things they dislike and they like is that obviously they don't want you to use general fund money to offset operational expenses. But one of the things that they recommend is, you guys call it something different, you can call it whatever you want. You call it an economic stabilization fund, other towns call it a tax stabilization fund. They all do the same thing. You're taking some revenues, some surplus money, you're sticking it in an account, so when you have years of potential tax increases, that you're injecting it in to help soften the blow a little bit.
So it came from our reserves originally.
it never probably transferred into, did it go into reserves?
Some of it, yeah,
originally?
so we didn't end up going out to bond. So what we had budgeted for, we did move, we moved $400,000, I believe, into that from the initial, to set it up. I think it was about $400,000. Yeah.
Originally set up, so.
Where is that, is that sitting in like a capital expense?
No, it's a separate, it's in
Or
a
is it-
separate, it's a separate fund,
A separate fund outside the regular fund balance?
correct,
So a designated one?
correct. I have to try to remember what fund number we made it.
It's designated, but I guess unallocated until you all approve using it
Right.
for something, so.
So again, this is going to open a hole for next year? A smaller hole?
A smaller hole,
That's
yes.
still a hole.
This was a little bit of a, oh, man, when I saw it, when I was reviewing the budget and I saw, well, there's a fiscal cliff of $660,000. How am I gonna make
Well,
up
we did
for
have
that?
we did have a plan. There was a debt, a long-term debt plan that the former town manager had put together of items that were gonna go in, things that were gonna come out of that, so there was,
But this 200,000 advances, right?
excuse me?
Taking the 200,000 is a little ahead of where the plan was to. It's just that on the, when we get to the expenditure side, that's all operating.
Yep.
It's all going to come back and visit us next year.
Yes, it could come back and visit us. I'm coming in, obviously, boots on the ground, ready to go. I have to grow the grand list.
Yep.
Or I know what we're gonna be sitting in next year. We're gonna be in meetings until 2 AM in the morning, trying to figure out a budget. And you all can say, well, I hear it coming already. If we're sitting here and there's holes in there, you're all gonna stare at
But
me
I mean, it's a fact. I
That's
mean,
fact, yep.
and it's trying to control, it's trying to control this year's costs,
Yep.
well, tax revenue. But you still have the same expenses next year with people,
Yep.
because people will also have raises,
Correct.
so.
Moving on, there's a page in, and mine's all been thrown around, so you do have a ARPA available balance by program. So as you know, ARPA dollars have to be allocated by 2024, spent by 2026. I know you all thought a few weeks ago you were done with the ARPA money. The last of it went to the sewer plant. I'm happy to report that it's not done yet, because there are some clawbacks that are gonna be happening. So as you see, there's a breakdown of each of the programs that still have some money. I met with both, Tom and Anne Marie today. They felt confident at the, of the money that you see available for reallocation. We feel that $55,264 be used to offset the general loss of revenue. In the final rule from the federal government, one of the main items that you could use ARPA dollars for, yes, we obviously know infrastructure, but also any type of revenue loss that we experienced, and we're obviously under $10 million with the final rule. That again, $55,000, not a huge hole to climb ourselves out of next year, but again, I was looking for any potential dollars to inject into the budget to try and soften whatever we potentially could. I do want to note that the water quality improvement program, we are not touching the $10,000. I heard that that's going to be spent up at the lake, and I know a lot of our residents do live up there. We do plan on keeping that money in there. We just want to remind the water quality improvement program that we need to get boogieing on it, because we have to allocate it, have a PO in the system by December 31st, 2024, and then it completely spent out by 2026. So we do need to move on that. I know it seems like, New Year's is a long way away. It's really not in government time. So let's get a PO in the system. Let's get that moving and get that money spent. So another recommendation is spending the last of the ARPA money so we can take ARPA off of our radars, inject it into the budget. It meets all of the rule requirements, and then officially say we're done with ARPA, and we've made the deadlines that the federal government put before us.
So just to give you a little background or a little summary, the Economic Stabilization Fund after the allocation for this current year budget, still before reallocating any additional funds out of that to offset any debt service, is at $590,000. So you still have additional funds which were meant to utilize and to allow the step in, the gradual increase in the debt service due to the road bond that was approved.
Moving on to the expenditure side of things, we are asking to restore, and we can talk about them later, we are asking to restore the town planner's position, defined contribution, FICA, and health insurance, which all has line items. We can get in that later. As we walk through this, then we'll look at it total, but those are just some staff reinstatements that were coming before you tonight. I know I was asked, after the meeting, I'm gonna be honest with all of you, I've been here for, 2 days. It's really hard to fully understand. The staff so far has been really, really awesome. They've been working very diligently, but again, it's 2 days. So right now, asking for that staffing reinstatement. We do plan to do a lot of economic activity. There are going to be a lot of developers that are gonna be asking questions, and we need to make sure that they're gonna get their answers that they want. Where I know enticing the developers, getting the developers to knock on the door, that's me. As far as, once we've gotten them sold on the town of Winchester, Winstead, we need to get them the answers, we need to get them right away. And these developers obviously wanna put shovels in the ground. To be discussed, obviously, as we move through. Some more reductions that we're gonna take, again, we really looked at as much as we possibly could. I'm gonna go through them quickly, and again, we looked at every possible item that we could. We're gonna take a $2,000 reduction in Inland Wetlands Commission. As you note, the note on the side, Secretary Services will not be used as frequently throughout the year. Overtime will not be used as frequently in that office. Office supplies, we're gonna drop $1,300, $500 in telephone, $200 in clothing allowance, $2,000 in the outside services. Again, we looked at every penny possible, and $500 is still $500. If it was on the ground, we would all wrestle for it. Employee benefits, no union contracts. It's the unnegotiated settlements. We had in the budget, big book, we had $100,000. I'm not seeing anything, speaking with Tom and Anne Marie, I'm not seeing why we need to put $100,000 into unnegotiated settlements. We didn't want to drop it to zero. We don't have that crystal ball.
Anyone retiring?
Well,
No one
that's,
told me.
so most of the retirements typically get budgeted in the compensated absence line item. However, we don't know. When someone leaves, we may have a payout that you may need to utilize that line item for, so.
Right.
So to bring it, if you were to bring that down to zero, that leaves you nowhere to, if you have to pay someone out, if they leave.
And the other creative way to do it, depending on how quickly we can fill that possible retirement, there will be salary savings. Usually when one person leaves, another person doesn't
Yeah.
start the next
But
day.
I think most legacy employees are retired,
There's still a few.
because when they get paid for their sick time and their vacation
There are
time.
still in the union contracts, there are still payouts for
Yeah, so
most of
there
the
are
union
payouts, vacation and
most of the
sick days and
contracts, yeah.
stuff, so.
So just another recommendation. And last but not least, it's obviously a sensitive subject. I know you all did very well in terms of the Board of Education expenditure. We are recommending that we take a reduction of $200,000 on the Board of Education expenditures. There were talks recently that the Board of Education is having a very good year right now, in that they're looking at pre-buying materials for next year. Some school books, curriculum books, and that roughly, I think, $190,000 was purchased for next year's school books. So I looked at that to say, if there's the school books,
Is this on top of the 300 we already took?
this is on top of the 300 we already
So
took.
it'd be 500.
It'd be 500 total, yes. So, it's hard, and I don't want to come out of the gate, stating, I'm against education. I'm not against education. I have a daughter who is in school. I have a son eventually going into school. We have a very challenging budget year. We honestly do. We're rolling up our sleeves. This is your umpteenth meeting, and we may be here all night discussing all of these. But we don't know. I put it out there as a, and it's all up to you, obviously. It's a discussion point that I think we need to go back and revisit, and see what we can do. But before we go, you know, and you all debate and discuss and ask as many questions as you want, if you go to the sheet, it's got green highlighting on it. You can see we originally started with your proposal on April 10th. There was a 9.66% increase. We are now down to a 6.82% increase. We dropped it, you know, roughly 2.84%. And the mill rate change is 1.8. Anne Marie fought and fought and fought. It was like 1.79. She didn't like that.
Nope.
So we didn't round it. We ended up adjusting a number. So roughly the mill rate change, as you can see, it was originally at 2.55. It's now at 1.80. Before Bob left, and Bob's always around. I could call him. Bob's big thing when I met with him before I officially started was, I got to get it below 2, Paul. I got to get it below 2. I got to get. So I went into my last meetings the last 2 days of getting this thing below 2. What you're seeing right now is 1.8. I think it's an honest budget. There's not a lot of trickery in it. I think this is a budget that potentially goes out to the public if you all think that's right. If it goes down, we need to obviously have serious conversations. Now we're cutting services and we're cutting staff. And when you cut staff, you cut services. But the voters then came out and spoke that 1.8 is simply too high. I guess I'm expecting a cut in service or staff. But, you know, for you all to debate, questions.
So the mill rate would be 28.19.
The mill rate would be 28.19. That is, yes.
Yes.
It was at 28.94.
So, Paul, I don't see any capital expenses taken out. I was hoping that I had discussions with Bob, that I, you know, was supporting more capital be taken out to keep more reserves, because we're at 200,000 now, and then we add the 200 to the economic stabilization. That came out of reserves too. So we're at 2 million too, which obviously it didn't come out of this year, but it's still our reserves. I'm uncomfortable with 2 million being taken out of reserves. So I still think we have some homework to do on the capital line.
Troy, it's an excellent point. When we look at the capital line, and we can discuss it tonight, where we want to go is whether we take an item out of the capital budget, and we can do it tonight, it doesn't change what we're going out and asking our taxpayers to pay.
Right, it doesn't change the mill rate.
Doesn't change the mill rate. And I wanted tonight to get you all comfortable with what we're going to send to, you know, public hearing. To be completely honest, when you really look at your capital items and you're using, you know, roughly $2 million of general fund money, you all can make the decision tonight and say, we're gonna fund no capitals. No, don't go crazy, right? We can come back after the budget has passed and we can fund these capital items. You can go to your residents, and not suggesting it, but you can go to your residents at any time and say, we're gonna take $1 million, Troy, out of our general fund and fund these capital items. Heck, if you all wanted to, you could vote on your capital items right now, go to the voters and say, these are the capital items we want to fund, and get it done before July 1st, and you can start some of these projects. You're not limited in terms of, you have the ability to use your general fund whenever you see fit. So what you want to do with capitals, and I'll be honest, I had 2 days where I spent a majority of my time was on the operational side of things. You got to give me a little bit more time in terms of the capital side of things. $2 million is a lot of money. I can't really tell you for sure about, you know, the tandem plow truck. Do we need it? What's the condition of our, it looks like it's a sinking fund, but I need more time on the capitals, because I don't know what we're in desperate need of, and what maybe we could say, maybe we can wait a year.
Okay, we'll
So,
talk about that.
yeah.
Well, I think before we start going there, we all don't feel the same way, Troy.
Okay.
Okay? We all don't feel that same way. And second of all, every time you go out to ask for more money, you're gonna be holding a referendum. Because the charter says that you have to, because it's not emergency, it's not, it's like emergency funding. The reason we do the capital within the budget is so that it's approved for the year, so that you don't have to keep having referendums, which every referendum has a cost to it, right? So, these items Bob went through, like, really closely, and Bob doesn't like to spend money. That's why his run from 2015, through, there weren't a lot of, we spent money, but we didn't, go crazy, and he's vetted all of these things. And some of these are things that were started, and some of these things, are the started continuation of them, and some of them have already, a bunch of things already got knocked backwards, right? So I would defend the capital right now, because 2 years ago, we didn't spend as much money as was proposed by the town manager, because we didn't have the capacity. The other thing that can happen is when we put the money in capital, it sits there, hopefully gets the work done, and if it doesn't, then you shift it afterwards back into the general fund or back into capital. So we have this money in our fund balance. It needs to work for people. It needs to fix things. It needs to go out and do these items, and they were vetted by Bob, I believe.
And I think the question had come up whether all of these capital improvements could get done during the time, during the fiscal year that we're talking about. And if they couldn't, should they still be in the budget? And I think to your point, Candy, if they're budgeted for, and we don't, for whatever reason, get those projects done, then they go back into the so-called rainy day fund that we're taking that $2 million out of, and the $2 million was well within guideline to what municipalities look at. I don't want to slow down capital improvements. God knows we need them. And, roads that are getting fixed here and other projects that are getting done. If your concern, Troy, is simply, can we do it all in the time that we're talking about? And I think that's one of the things you had mentioned to me you were. Whether or not we get to it, if we don't get to it, that money gets put back in the savings account. So for that matter, I don't think we should cut that money and slow down any of these capital improvements that we desperately need. And it doesn't affect the operating budget or the mill rate either. So from that standpoint, it doesn't burden the taxpayers. It allows us to see real improvements in town get done, particularly, again, the list of roads that are here, the plow truck, the things that we've put off for a long time that need to get done. I think we need to leave the capitals the way they are. And again, if they don't get done, the money gets put back.
Is that true, Anne Marie?
So you have a couple choices, like Candy said. It could stay in the capitals. It can be reallocated, but it has to be reallocated as part, you can't just reallocate a line item, whenever you want to. It has to be part of an approval process, I believe, that has to be done at budget time. So let's say you get to the end of the year when we're doing the budget next year, and Jim says, I didn't get to this project, this project, this project. And who knows, maybe over the year, another project will leap over that and become a higher priority than one of these projects that they didn't get to, that you could then, in your budget for next year, you can reallocate those funds, or you can choose to bring that back into the general fund. But it has to be done as part of the budget process. It can't, that's part of our charter. It can't just be done, and it can't just be reallocated to another project. If something else came up during the year, you can't reallocate from a line item.
Yeah.
It has to be approved according to the charter rules.
But if the work doesn't get done, the money doesn't disappear.
Right.
That is correct.
It doesn't find its way into the operating budget and disappear.
Does it stay there for that project if we don't?
It would,
move
so if you're allocating, let's say, just use 2 million for the number, if you're allocating the 2 million from fund balance, and you have a certain, this list of projects, when you do next year's budget, you're gonna look and you're gonna say, did we do these projects? If you didn't do these projects, you can analyze and say, do we move that money back over? Now, it's not a physical movement of cash because we don't have a separate capital cash account. It all stays in our operating cash. It's just accounting-wise, that money has been allocated to be used for capitals. And it would stay there unless you as a board voted to, or put it in the budget to move that money elsewhere.
If I may, something that I'm gonna suggest next year, as we walk through the budget process, and we've done it in other towns. So your rough budget this year, board, is roughly 39,342,457. Okay? What I've just done is I've subtracted the $1.9 million of capitals. So what we've done in my past town is we've created the budget, operational equals X dollars. Then we created a Schedule C. And Schedule C would then include capital items with the expenditure coming out of wherever we see fit. So, you know, it's hard because you're all been going down, you know, a path of putting it in your budget and then funding it with your general fund. Fine. But to your point, Troy, to get you a little bit more comfortable, your operating budget is $39,342,000. Your capital budget is 1.9. We're gonna try and get all those projects completed. If not, that money's, it's protected. It's not going in, it's protected. So, as Candy said, and she did make an excellent point, that Bob vetted these projects. He felt confident on it. I know you've talked about these capital projects several times. You've debated them. I know some things were cut out of it. And Mr. Marino's correct as well, that we need to start doing stuff, you know?
I
You either
agree
grow or
with
go,
that.
you know, type deal. And this is an investment in the community.
But you still have the opportunity. I mean, if we want to talk about like, you know, the openness of it, you still have the opportunity. Let's say, you know, Bob was, you know, didn't vet something correctly down the road and all of a sudden you ran into it and you go, oh no, let's stop it. You as a town manager can do that and the money would still be there. But I
Money's
also
protected.
want to make sure that, you know, that it's led by you, the town manager, right? Because there's differing opinions here on things. And, you know, and projects and you have staff and that you have time to evaluate all that.
Yep.
But at the same time, the money is still there.
Money's still there, yeah.
Just so you know that Bob did re-vet, and there was additional cuts
Okay.
that were not presented tonight, that were,
Well, they were projects that there was a question as to whether they could get done during this
Correct.
budget time.
well, there was other things too, but yes.
But again, if the money is protected, let's not take them out of the list and hopefully get them done.
You know, I wanna give an example, because it was just brought up in a meeting yesterday. So you have the Smith Hill Bridge maintenance, 62.5. Mr. Rollins was in my office yesterday. We're ready to go on that project. We can't start the project until July 1st. We could conceivably start that project tomorrow. I asked Mr. Rollins if there was a way, you know, and I should have wrote the number down. There was roughly already $180,000, $160,000 put towards that bridge. This is the last of it, and this completes, you know, what we want to do with that bridge. Unfortunately, we can't start the project until all of the money's been allocated, but that project's ready to go. And if this budget passes, these capital items pass, shovels in the ground. I'll say July 1st, but don't shoot me if it's July 2nd,
What
okay?
would cause that? Because that's very unheard of that you can't start a project until you.
I don't have all the
It's the
funding.
budget.
Because the budget won't, you vote on it in May or
Right.
June.
It's in this year's budget.
in
I
this-
not in
understand
last
that,
year's.
but that shouldn't stall the project.
So I can't allocate the town to an expenditure without having all of the money in place. It's like, hey, I promise you redo my deck, hopefully I get that paycheck, you know? That would be bad accounting,
If
that
it's
we
in
have to enter
capital
a
and it's
PO.
coming from reserves, then it's.
We
gonna
haven't
be
approved it yet. So,
Obviously, there's gonna be no voting on capital, so.
but the voters will vote. So when the voters go out to the budget, when they go place a vote, and I'm just gonna say it, but it could change. When they go out and vote on a $41,305,000 budget, they've also approved the remaining amount for that Smith Hill Bridge.
I work differently than that, so I don't know how that works, but.
It's, yes, everybody treats government standards are a little bit different. I know if I went and tried to type in a PO for
You
200.
you won't get a PO before July 1st to start
There
that
you go.
project, so.
Well, you answered my question. I know if
Question
I tried
answered,
to, so, question asked, question
You'd be
answered.
lucky to get it by July 7th, so.
So,
Right, well, I
Fine,
mean,
we-
that gets fixed too by doing, planning ahead of time. Or planning sooner, or not sooner, not ahead of time, but
Yep.
foreseeable planning down the road, being able to see where state money's coming from, see where things are gonna come from. I think that if you looked at, if you did a strategic plan on where things should go, I think that would be, advance things quicker.
one of the items that came up yesterday, and I know you've all done a good job, we really need to, and over the summer, you're not taking the summer off, we're gonna we're gonna start really putting together a 5-year plan. We really need to put together a 5-year plan. I need to get comfortable what you all feel, and then finding out, okay, the dollars attached to it, and when we're gonna start unlocking these projects. And when we go out and we bond money, one of the questions that they're gonna ask us as we go to the rating agency is, do you have a 5-year capital plan? I wanna be confident when I answer that question when we go out to our next bond. We do, in fact, here it is.
And we have one, but whether it's a realistic number is,
Let's look at it. Yep. Ball's in your court, ladies and gentlemen.
Are we gonna do that executive session?
Yes.
The $191,000 grant for instructional supplies that you had mentioned was a state mandate, and the state gave us the $191,000 and specified that it was for a new reading program with a date that it had to be in place, and it was for kindergarten through grade 3. So it was not general instructional supplies. We were not planning on putting in a new reading program until the state mandated that we had to do it, because we sure as heck didn't have the money for it. So I would like you to be aware of that information before you make any decision tonight, please.
Thank you.
so in terms of our process up here, do we wanna go easy to hard or hard to easy? Huh?
I thought they were all easy.
So we had a potential executive session on our agenda as well to discuss, what was that for, Todd? That was for staffing,
Personnel matters.
personnel matters? Should we tackle that next?
And then come back?
Yeah.
Does the person or personnel know that we're having an executive session?
We, it's for all of the budget for next year, so all positions will be discussed in the executive session of potentially in or out of the budget. So it wasn't one particular position. I think all positions should be discussed if we want to keep them in and if we want to keep them out. But
Is
it's-
that executive sessionable?
It is executive sessionable, that's a tongue twister, because it is a personnel matter. It is, and one of the particular reasons is, when you're talking about potential cuts of position, they're sensitive items.
Right.
And I think done in executive session is the right way to do it, in that it allows you all to talk more freely in executive session. And then we come out and we will make no decisions in executive session. They
But
will be
in
done
executive
public.
session, there's only certain things that we can talk about.
Personnel matters is one of them.
I know, but personnel matters, it depends on what part of the personnel matters that we're gonna be talking about, right? So it can't be about performance, because they're not there.
Yep.
So it can only be,
Budget item.
In or out of the position. I mean, and that's what we're gonna, talk about is this position in or is this position out? It's not gonna be a
Well,
performance.
sort of already done that in public.
Okay. It's up to you. I
I
had it
just
put on
don't
the
know if
agenda.
I just don't know if it's,
It's you all. I've given you the opportunity to go in executive session. By no means do you have to.
Well, what do we think? We want executive session or?
I'm gonna vote not to. You all can vote to go in,
Vote no too.
but I just think if it's about a position in the budget or not, we just say that yes or no out in public. Cause I don't know that, unless your experience is different than my experience.
Done it both ways. I put that on as an option. That is all. I'm not, it is up to you all. So,
We can do it here
Okay.
in open session.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you start at the top, work your way down?
Yep, so, number R5, do we have a motion on increasing the adjustment rate from 98 to 98.5?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Unanimous? Item R6, moving collections for motor vehicle supplemental tax from 200,000 to 225,000. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Paul. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? R7, collections from interest and lien fees from 160,000 to 165,000.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous? R8, grant income. Social service grant from Building Healthier Communities, removing 50,000.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Troy. So removing this grant, does that put us on the hook for the entire salary, or are we just removing 50,000 from the salary?
It's a part-time position, that's what I was understood.
Well, it's not at the moment, and I think it brings back the discussion that we had a few weeks ago, which was when we voted to retain the social services director as a full-time position, we were doing it with this $50,000 as funding it, or funding part of it. So I think it puts that decision back on the table for us.
if I may, Mr. Mayor, I'll just note that the budget that you're looking at, just so you have a complete, total, clear picture, that 1.8 mill rate increase does have the position as it currently exists. We did not reduce it down to part-time, we did not reduce it. We are being truthful in budgeting. We don't believe we're gonna get to $50,000. That would adjust the mill rate. I don't think by all that much, whatever you decide, but I want you to know that the proposal at 1.8 mills does have that position at full-time.
Then I'd like to take away my second.
What does that mean?
Means,
He's not
take
seconding
away
the
my
motion.
second.
Well, your second was simply,
I'll
we're not
sec-
getting
I'll-
the,
I'll second it.
okay.
Any
It
other,
doesn't have to do with the position, it's the $50,000 that we're not getting. That's what we're voting on right now. We can
Right, so-
discuss the position.
any other discussion?
So the $50,000, the $50,000 was out of the grand list.
No. It was a grant that we're not gonna get, or we may not get.
Correct. Well, we already knew that all along. There was.
But it was in our
half-
budget.
it's half budgeted. And then the other second half we were supposed to pay for.
You're talking about the position. The grant and the position are different items. So the grant was money that when we voted to keep the social services director in place, we believed at that moment
It was
we
gonna
were
be
getting
paid
this
entirely
50,000.
at 50
We were
with the
getting this
grants.
$50,000, which pays for a portion of that position. The position's a separate discussion, which we will have tonight.
Okay.
What we're voting on right now is whether the 50,000 should stay in the budget, because it's a grant we don't think we're gonna get. So we're voting to take that out of the budget.
But I didn't think the grant had to be in the budget. The 50,000 I thought was.
In our
coming out of the
original budget,
taxpayers.
we had budgeted that we were going to get the $50,000 grant. Since it looks as though we're not going to get that, we have to adjust the budget that shows we're not gonna get the 50,000. It has nothing whatever to do with the position. We can discuss the position afterwards, because when we voted to keep that position in place, we voted it based on that money. All we're doing right now is saying, okay, doesn't look like we're gonna get the 50,000, so we have to vote to take it off the budget.
Yeah, I'm confused on that.
Yes.
Anne Marie's it on the line here, the specific specific line?
We're not gonna get the money.
It's-
So
I
we're-
know that,
What line was it on?
See here,
$1,000.
When we had the grant money, where did you put it?
It was in the line item, it should be highlighted in blue, it's the one that is account number 19997100510 social
Troy,
services
it's
grant.
right here.
50,000.
It's right here, in this,
Yeah, yeah.
right here in the front page.
I believe we've
right down here,
cleared it up.
The second blue, second blue line,
So, sir, yes.
so that's we said we were gonna get 50,000 for it,
So now we're getting nothing.
nothing.
Correct.
That's
Okay,
not-
that's what I was confused about.
So now we're voting to take the $50,000 out.
Correct. It's been motioned and seconded. And discussed. All in
yes.
favor? Unanimous? Item R9, building permit fees increasing from $150,000 to $225,000 to adjust for planned increases on permit rates. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Steve. Discussion?
Is this a good move? We're trying to to attract businesses to this place, and when you make fees and things difficult, that kind of goes the opposite direction. I was on planning and zoning for a long time. I'm a zoning officer. I know how people feel about the fees, and especially in this town, you know, they get put into so many different meetings when they're not supposed to, and the fees add up. So I don't know if I'm on board with that.
So are these fees for building permits only, correct? Not for the fees that people pay when they're going before P and Z or ZBA or wetlands?
That is correct. This is solely based on permit fees.
We issue a building permit, this is the actual fee, and do we know how it compares to local municipalities?
We did look at it. We are still gonna be relatively on the lower side to local communities that are surrounding us and, communities throughout the state of Connecticut. Troy, I guess I'll offer up what hasn't increased in 20 years. Staffing has increased. You know, you look at wages that were 20 years ago, well, this is a way we have to offset, you know, cost of our staff. You know, we have now, you know, great people, we've had great people through many years who have earned significantly higher wages. Well, the people that are using those people more are not every single taxpayer, but it's the one pulling those permits. So they should pay a little bit more to help offset the rising costs of our staffing levels for everything that we use in that particular office. Heck, a pad of paper used to cost us, you know, $1, and now it's probably $4. I don't like raising fees any more than the next guy. This is not a budget gimmick where next year I'm gonna say, we're gonna raise those permit fees again. No, but we haven't raised them in well over 20 years. It's time.
But the other part of it too is, the 75,000 isn't all gonna come from increased fees. If you look back at the 2022 actual and the 2023 actual is at 200 and, please don't use blue again and black, for old people here.
Sorry, I
It's
picked
at
the wrong
it's
color
at, you know,
today.
23 actual is $211,000, so he's taking it to 225,000. So if you looked at last year's actual, you're getting $12,000 from new permit fees.
If we go through with it. So, and 100% right. I mean, we have to get before all of you and decide if we're going to change the permit fees in that office. But we look at historical data as well, and we've historically well collected over that line item. And we still have obviously 2 months to go. And maybe what we propose, all of those fees don't, you know, get passed, and we take some of the proposal and cut them in half. We're still under projecting that line item significantly.
That's explained better now. It was hypothetical, and it all had to be voted on, and that's what my concern was. So I didn't want to set it in stone until it was, but now I understand if we are already making that at the current rate, then I don't have a problem with that.
Paul, what's the average increase, percentage-wise? Not particular permits, but just,
There wasn't a set increase in terms of, we looked at, you know, averages. They put together a great proposal with that. Can I get back to you
Yeah,
on that?
I'm
Obviously,
just curious, are we going up,
fully
are we going up
talk that
75%
Oh,
on the
no,
fees?
no,
Are we
no,
going
no,
up
I would, yeah.
5% on the fees? I mean,
No, it's not that significant at all. You know, you're looking at maybe something that was $200 going to maybe $225. You know, we're not talking, something that would, I feel, would slow or hamper business development in any way, shape, or form. I'll throw out, and something that we can discuss, since we're just kind of on that line, a lot of towns are out there are doing fire department fees as well, in that, fire department is needing to sign off on particular plans. There are now fees in several communities that are now tacking on that, and I can tell you from the town I came from, not one person, we're not building in your town, because there's that, we have to look at things a little bit differently, but let's pull that off for a whole nother meeting when we just talk about fees and everything like that.
Paul, did you have something?
I did not.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yeah.
In favor? Unanimous? Where are we? Item 10, R10, investments. Increasing income investments from a revenue of $200,000 to a revenue of $350,000 to adjust for the excellent performance of STIF and fiscal year 23-24 historical results.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, just, tell me what the investments, where is that line? Income on investments. So in '23, the actual was 353,000,
Yes,
correct?
yes,
In '23, 353,000, and
Yes.
Currently, we're at 309,000.
Currently, we're
No.
at 500, so you're looking as of the 11/30, but as of
Currently.
yesterday, we were at $540,000.
correct.
So you're going to 350, and last year we were at
53.
353.
Any other
I
discussion?
think the,
But remember, 540 already this year, with 2 months to go.
right,
So I truly believe we'll probably come in at 580 to $600,000
this year.
This year.
Next year, if it starts sliding, you're gonna
Starts-
get right to the 350.
That's why, yeah, I feel 350 there. But
Okay, we'll see what happens.
Other discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Item number R11, fees from the recreation revenue from $20,000 to $35,000 to offset general fund recreation expense increases.
and I think it's important, and I apologize before you vote, we looked at the number, was it roughly 187,
No, about 159.
159,000 currently?
That's across all programs.
All programs.
That's, I think we already gave you the numbers in Fund 15. For all the programs that are,
Well, I have them from last year, but I
Yeah.
didn't get them from this year.
no, I think we had
So-
those with the,
so
I
we're
think we gave them
talking-
with the grants.
So this is our hypothetical give back, the Park and Recs give back to the town. So we want to increase that from 20 to 35?
And that basically covers, not that you're assigning it to one thing or another, but that basically covers your part-time, that, for Tanya's helper. That's the salary for her part-time associate.
So you said the total on all recreation program income is $159,000.
Balances,
Balance
no,
in-
balances,
Oh,
available balances.
So what's the income every year?
It depends, based on the programs.
In participation, obviously. So
Right.
right now,
Yeah,
that
that's not
account
that
just
paper.
hangs
What I
out
get
there,
here.
and any money that's, paid for a program goes in that account. They offset, obviously, some expenses as well, with that account.
Right, so, yeah, so last year, 'cause I have last year's, from last year. So last year,
So last year, recreation programs brought in $199,000, and the expenditures related to that were $190,000. So it netted only $8,700. That does not account for the expenditures that stay in the general fund for your, for your director, so,
but they said, against expenses, what are the expenses?
well, for any of the program expenses. That's a total of all of the program expenses.
Right, so somebody teaches tennis, and they pay a fee back to the rec department. How much is
Correct.
that?
I don't know what those fees are. You'd have to get a full analysis from your recreation director of what all of the fees on all of the programs are.
Right, so last year in the 22 net, like men's basketball was 2,000, Route 44 was 1,600.
Right.
Dog obedience class was 1,100, youth basketball 36, recreation programs 2. So we're not going over, are we? We're not in the 35? Looks
So
like-
your balance is,
looks
your balance is as of 3/31 of '24, and then there's a few expenditures that need to come off of that. Your balance, your net balance available, because you have cumulative year over year, your cumulative balance is just about available funds for all of the recreation programs is about $159,000
But,
across all programs.
but it looks like in the, okay, so there's more things.
So there are some, there are small programs that some of them have an available balance of, we have one that has $14, but then we have another program that has a surplus in it of $76,000, which is your biggest program, your summer program. But then you've got youth basketball, but then you have a variety of other all of the other smaller programs that the recreation department is in charge of.
You know, on these for next time, on the Fund 15, maybe it would be good to just right through here, put a line and total the above parts that aren't recreation, and then down below, everything that is recreation.
Yeah, we have it in here,
Yeah,
so.
well, you have it in there, but,
I don't
have it over
I don't
here.
know what we gave you in there, so.
so, all right.
Any other discussion?
I don't think we've made a motion on it yet, actually.
We did not.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Thank Paul, thank Troy. Now is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor? No. Opposed? 5-2. Item number R12. Debt administration, transfer in from the Economic Stabilization Fund of $200,000 to offset payments on debt interest. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Troy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Discussion. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Unanimous? Item R13, transfers in from the American Rescue Plan funds of $55,264 to offset the general loss of revenues. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Any discussion?
Paul, can you find any more? Because this kind of reappeared, so I'll see what you can do.
I'll keep putting it through the crank.
So what will have to happen at your next meeting would be the actual motions to reallocate the funds. That hasn't taken place yet. So that would be for your next regular scheduled meetings.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Moving on to expenditures, E24, the land use. Reinstatement of the town planner position, adding $79,800 to reinstate the town planner position as recommended by the town manager. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Candy. Discussion.
So, I guess I'm just wondering how this came back after we've already addressed this.
I can comment that. So I felt as we go through the transition of obviously me coming on as the town manager, that I want to be able to assess, each position in its entirety in terms of what was existing, before I got here. And then ultimately, make decisions from there and bring it all to you. I look at a town planner's position in terms of what I've seen in other communities and what gets done. They are a very integral part of development within the community. Please.
So how will you use this town planner position based on your past experience? Will you be using the town planner a little bit differently than maybe it's being used now?
I would say, 2 days in, not knowing fully exactly what the town planner, I did try and get up to speed. I was copied on well over 100 emails, once my email got activated. One thing I know is that when you have a serious developer that comes in or is interested in coming in, they have a lot of questions. And in particular, permitting, what is the process to go through it all, if they need a particular zone change, that's something that the town planner is going to coach them on and get them all of the information that they need. I'm gonna raise my hand right now, that is not my skill set. I did not go to school to be a town planner in terms of, okay, if you're gonna go from business, zone 1 to a business zone 2, there are items that, when they go before the Planning and Zoning Commission, that they're going to be looking for in order to say, is this a proper zone change or not? That's what the town planner should be working on with each and every developer. As unique situations come up, they're going to be able to answer that particular developer's question in hopes that whatever they're looking to build, construct, they're gonna be able to get that zone change, to be able to build.
But besides all that, where do you see this position in the reinstatement for your needs, putting back in terms of general planning, in terms of the economic development? Because, I wrote down this little number over here, $400,000 whole for next year.
And this is a $112,000 reinstatement all in, by the time you look at salaries and
Right.
benefits.
So, I mean, I guess that's the thing, is the
And
direction.
you're, I'm sorry, Candy, but you're talking about somebody who can just answer a question about the regulations. Essentially, if you have a developer here that wants quick information, I mean, that's not what a town planner is. That's really someone who works in that office who can answer questions about regulations.
Did we not just recently digitize and put all our zoning regulations online too for
Yes.
full view?
And we also, before this all happened and the land use board got very large all of a sudden, there was one person, the secretary, and she answered all the questions for all the developers, and it worked quite well. So,
I mean, yeah, it's another $112,000 that, there's a lot of places we could put $112,000 if we're gonna reinstate that in the budget.
agreed.
There is, I guess, and it is up to this board. I guess what we wanna do is be able to have all of the tools that we need in order to start our redevelopment. And this could be a tool. What does the job look like today? What does the job look like in 30 days? What does the job look like in 6 months? Well, let's define that as we move through the process. Things can change at any given time. As we see the needs change, we can obviously change what the particular town planner is doing. I know in my last community, I was attached at the hip with our town planner, and that they were with me on any of the development calls. When a new developer came in and they had particular questions, that town planner was with us. I'm just saying right now, it was hard for me to, assess, do we need it, do we not need it? I came before you to say, can I have the tool to at least see what, we can do? I'll be the first one to tell you that if the tool's not needed, okay, that's a different conversation. At $112,000, as Mr. Marino stated, I don't think you'll find, and we were playing with this all morning long, it's a budget mover in terms, I'm not even sure it would adjust the mill rate. Would it?
So,
So I like your analogy, and yeah, the tools are great, but you can still do a roof with a hammer, you don't necessarily need a nail gun.
yeah, and for me, if we find ourselves in a situation in next year's budget where there's enough development going on that you're finding this is a hole that you don't have the tool that you need, then we could talk about allocating for it at that point. I think budgeting for it this year, and again, an extremely very tight budget that we're struggling with here, I'd rather wait till we need it than budget for it right now. That's my opinion.
I'll second Paul on that.
And then maybe you get the nail gun.
My concern is we just hired you 2 days ago. we don't want to set you up to get your knees taken out right away by having a position to assist you and then not having a position to assist you. If it's your recommendation that we add it, I voted originally to remove it, but if you think we need it, I'm okay putting it back in.
There's so many needs, Todd, though. If we're gonna put $112,000 back in the budget, we've got police needs, we've got all kinds of needs out there. I'm just wondering if this is the best public works. I mean, $112,000 in a lot of places that we could put it.
And we don't even know if this is gonna pass.
And I agree that I don't wanna cut your legs out either, but I would, I'd really rather see this need it than just budget for it on a maybe that we're gonna need it.
I appreciate all of the comments. I don't think anyone is expecting me to fail or wants me to fail. You've all been, you know, absolutely great from the early on process before my name was even thrown out at meetings. So I don't see any decisions that you make are setting me up for failure. I don't think any of you are out here to set, you know, because setting me up for failure is setting the town up for failure. And none of you want to see that.
I imagine you're pretty resourceful. You'll figure out how to get it done.
I play all my cards too easy. Yes, but you know, again, it's just another tool in my belt, in our belt, in the town's belt, that the big driver, which you all stated, is economic development. Economic development. Grow this town. I heard it during the interview process. I've heard it in, you know, one-on-one meetings with y'all, casual conversations. I know my marching orders. I look to say, okay, what tools do I need in my belt to follow through on the marching orders that you all gave me? And I threw it back in. And throws a bad word. I placed it back in because you're talking a position. But again, it is up to all of you. We'd be one of the few towns that do not have a town planner. There's a lot of communities, I think out of 169 towns, you'll find that a lot of towns do. Again, yes, $112,000 is a lot of money when you're faced with the budget that we're faced with. I hear you, I do. If I have to roll up my sleeves, I roll up my sleeves. I'm not gonna run out of the room, whatever decision you make tonight. But I at least wanted one more opportunity to let you know that it's just a tool that I'd be grateful to have, but respect your decision in whatever you decide.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I think you all heard me ask Bob Geiger, what's the impact of losing a position like this? And I had some private conversation with Bob after the meeting, and I said, does Paul Harrington know what we're planning here? And he says, well, not at this point, but he'll figure it out. And I think once you lose a position like this, it's very hard to get it back. And I would support us reinstating this town planner.
Anything else?
I know how everybody else feels, and I know how I voted the last time too. To me, the staff is our most valuable resource that we have. And if this gives Paul an extra tool, I think we should reinstate it, and I think that's how I'm gonna vote. If he later on down the road decides to say, hey, maybe not, I just think that position needs to be in a different direction than what he's been going in. That's just my feelings.
Okay, we have no further discussion. All in favor of re-adding the town planner position, E24?
I'm sorry?
Just a point of order, was it ever first and seconded?
I think it was.
Yes.
Was it? Okay.
you got
I
it.
might have missed it. Okay, I just didn't want you guys to.
Yeah, it was Steve and Candy.
Okay.
Opposed? 4-3. That would bring us to item E25, the defined contribution for the town match from $162,277 to $167,065. Do we have a motion? motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? 4-3. E26, employee benefits FICA from $494,067 to $500,172. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Sorry.
All in favor? Opposed? 4-3. E27, health insurance from $1,130,124 to $1,151,327 to reinstate the employee plus one health insurance coverage. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? 4-3. Moving on to number E28. The Secretary Support Staff for Inlands Wetlands Commission from $6,000, reducing it to $4,000. The secretarial services will not be used as frequently throughout the year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Unanimous. Item E29, land use overtime, reduction from $5,000 to $4,000. Overtime will not be used as frequently with a fully staffed building and planning office. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Steve. Any discussion?
Can we take that right out? Because now that we're fully staffed, now we got enough people to handle everything, there should be zero overtime.
No, because you have call-outs. So your building inspector, you have call-ins if there's a fire, if there's a situation, so there is always overtime in that department. Because your fire marshal is in that department now also, and your building inspector.
So who covers the fire marshal when he's out?
Well,
Don't you mean if he's called out
anytime
to
if they have a fire, they have a 3-hour minimum call-in.
Oh, so if he's at a fire, it's.
Correct, they get
Oh,
overtime.
I gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? 601. Item E30, land use to office supplies, from $5,000 to $3,700. Supplies can be brought in fiscal year '24. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Land use, telephone, from $2,500 to $2,000. The Economic Development Director's phone was on this line.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? 6-1. Item E32, clothing allowance, from $400 to $200. Additional clothing is not needed.
So moved.
And this is in the land use office, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. Oh, yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Troy. Discussion?
Yeah, well, what do they use for clothes for land use?
I assume I think it's protective equipment. I'm not sure exactly what they have for clothing, but I think they also might have shoes too.
Probably shoes,
think
it's
they have
probably hard
boots.
hats. Troy, as you probably
They
know,
mi-
hard hats expire every 2 years. So
Wouldn't that be in their union thing, in their union contract, that gets paid through that? In their line item?
Is it for uniforms for the fire marshal?
No, I don't think it's uniforms. I don't know exactly what, actually, I'd have to pull up, let me pull up the summary. I can pull up the summary and tell you what is budgeted for.
Yeah, it's only 200 bucks, but the safety gear's PPE should be under PPE.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I mean, this is like, what do we buy them, T-shirts or something? I mean, or hats, or I don't know, that's what I wanna know.
It could be their annual allowance, but let me
So Troy,
pull it up.
to answer, and Anne Marie's gonna pull it up. So we did go to department, we asked for money, and they offered up 200. If you offered up $200,
I wasn't questioning
Taking
it.
it.
If I was going the opposite way,
Well,
I'm taking it. And
I
they
mean,
were
that-
offering it to us, I took it.
Not that it's a lot of money, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
can we delete that whole line item? I mean, that $200, what are you gonna get for $200?
So I'm actually not sure we can delete it because what's in here, it says union mandated uniform allowance. So,
Well, that's what I asked.
yeah. So it may be that we can't even take the 200 out.
Probably not.
They did offer it, so we took it.
It has to be a signed agreement with the union.
E33, Land Use Office, outside services from 5,000 to 3,000. We do not expect to solicit as many outside services as we did in fiscal year '24.
We didn't vote on the last one, Todd.
Go back to
Need that
item
$200.
E32. We have a motion, we have a second?
Yeah, we
Yep.
All in favor? Unanimous. Now we're on item E33, outside services from $5,000 to $3,000, as we don't expect to solicit as many outside services as we did in fiscal year '24.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Bill. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That was unanimous. Item E34, employee benefits from unnegotiated settlements, moving it from 100,000 to 50,000. No union contracts in the current negotiations for fiscal year '25. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Were you in favor or abstaining?
I was in favor.
Okay, unanimous. Item E35, Board of Education. Board of Education expenditures from $22,519,465 to $22,319,465, a reduction of $200,000. Budget reduction is recommended by the town manager. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Paul, can I ask, did you have a conversation with the superintendent about this?
I did not. This just came off of the run at roughly almost 4 o'clock this afternoon. So I do apologize to the superintendent that I didn't have a conversation, but obviously, conversation can be had first thing tomorrow morning, to discuss it with them. Again, as I stated earlier, we're in a tough situation. And you look at all of the Board of Eds in 169 towns, every town is suffering right now. And, you know, do I want a budget to ever fail at its first referendum? No, because it's just gonna put us into longer and longer meetings. It's a starting point. Is it going to engage, you know, the community in that $200,000 is potentially, you know, a drastic, cut? I truly, you know, when you look at a $22 million budget, I don't believe it will be, but it's a conversation with the superintendent. But I at least wanted this board an opportunity where 54% of our budget is going to educational expenses, that is an area we need to look at if we're trying to bring down the mill rate, and we're trying to bring down the overall ask to our taxpayers. That one of the areas you have to go to is you have to go to your larger budgets. And when you have a budget that's 54%, it needed to be at least put on the table and discussed with this board of how you all felt, and then gone from there. I wasn't privy to, you know, conversations earlier. I did watch the videos of it, but I know what Bob wanted. He wanted a mill rate under 1.8, or under 2, we're at 1.8. This is an area where I could, you know, present to you a budget that was under, you know, 2 mills. And I wanted to at least put that out there so you could discuss where you were at with the Board of Education expenditures.
Paul, I think for
I would-
clarification for everybody here and everybody watching on YouTube too, because I've had several people, and it keeps happening, coming to me saying, you're cutting the education budget, you're cutting the education budget. Can we clarify and can you confirm? The budget is not being reduced whatsoever. The budget is exactly the same as last year. There was an ask, right? There was an ask for an increase of originally, I believe it was 1.4? 1.3? So for clarification purposes, we're not cutting the budget. This education budget's not cut it. We're reducing the ask. So they will receive additional funding, just as not as much as they're asking for.
So to,
And so everybody else knows, once we pass this increase, next year, if we're in real trouble, we can't take any of that back. Once we give it, it's that amount forever. It does not come back. So there's a lot of confusion amongst people out in the town of how this is working, because I get people coming up to me all the time going, you're cutting the education budget, you're cutting the education budget. And it's the same, it can be said with all positions that are asked for.
Well,
You're cutting the fire
we're
department, you're cutting the
reducing
police
the ask.
We're
but-
reducing the ask.
But not by the 200,000 you see on the page tonight. That's in addition to the 300 that was on the page the
Correct.
last
Correct.
time. So that's a $500,000 reduction in the ask. And that's gotta mean bodies and services to
But that
kids.
also means an $800,000 increase from last year's budget, correct?
Yeah, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, a lot of the things we've talked about tonight are transfers and economic stabilization, revenue things we're doing. This has the effect, and I only know this because I know that the schools have been very good at keeping the line on their requests over the last several years. As a matter of fact, we knew last year was gonna be a tough budget to pass, and it was. It took us more than one try. Without having the conversation with the superintendent, I'm just guessing that this is going to mean cuts in positions and,
Guaranteed.
I beg,
Guaranteed.
It may, but there's always the threat of, you're hurting the kids, we're gonna go after teachers, we're gonna cut programs.
yeah, that's.
There's never a discussion, and same with town departments, I notice this. It's gonna affect services net. We never talk about administration. It's always, we're going after the teachers. And there's still an $800,000 increase. So again, we need to put it out for vote, clarification, I understand your point.
Yeah.
But it's a tough year.
I think as a board, we've said that we're very proud of the budget we put together with respect to safety as a top priority and the importance of education. We've had that discussion right at this table. And so I would oppose this motion on that basis. I think we ought to hold the line on education.
Candy, did you have something? Oh, I thought you had something. Any other discussion?
Does this just give Paul the opportunity to go and have this discussion with the Board of Ed, voting this in? I mean, we can vote it in or vote it out, whichever, but the final decision comes to Board of Ed, is it not?
No. This is the money we're handed to the.
No, I understand that, but I mean, every ounce of this Board of Ed budget has been a negotiated, right to where it is today, so.
I guess, if I may, to give you a little bit more to discuss, to think about. On the town side of the operational budget, we thoroughly looked at the expenses and we looked at the revenues. Budget fails, we're gonna lose staffing, we're gonna lose services. If we go, and use your implementer thing, if we add an additional $200,000 back into the budget, what, just so the board has an idea, what does that do? Yeah, add 200,000. In,
It's not on. No, it doesn't look like any red light.
Oh, battery might have been.
Batteries may.
use your, well, you can use your loud voice.
Are you asking if we leave the Board of Education at where it is right now?
Leave it at the leave it at the $1 million. So add, you know, that little, the little cell you have for 200,000? You know how you can add and subtract things out of the budget? Let's just put in 200,000 so the board sees,
No, adding back to.
adding to, because I want the board to see the difference, what it does to 1.8 mils.
Well, right now, without voting, with all of the changes that you've made so far, right now you are at a 2 mil increase.
So
That's exactly where you are right now.
So it's .2.
If you, for
point
every
two.
$100,000 reduction is another point, whatever.
So there's your talking point. There's where you all have to decide. And I don't know where you all are in the process in terms of what you wanna do with the budget, but do you wanna go to town meeting at 2 mils? Do you wanna go at 1.8 mils? Do you wanna go more, or you wanna go less? But I wanted to give you options in terms of,
So we went from a proposed 1.8 back up to a 2, and now we're talking about going it back up.
No.
no, not at all. No, I threw that out there that you do have the choice.
If we
you
voted
wanted
this
to.
down, you'd be at a 2.
We started the night at a 2.55. With all the recommended cuts on this budget, we would have gone down to 1.8.
Oh,
So if
right,
we put the
correct, okay.
200,000
Yeah, so
back
we're going
in,
from
we'd be
1.8
at
back up to 2.
we'd be at a 2.
The planner's back in too, so it's a 300.
No, the planner was part of this
Yeah,
budget.
it was part of it.
Had we not approved the planner, then we would have
We'd
come
be
in
less.
below the 1.8.
Correct.
That is correct.
You would basically be at, be at 1.9. So if you left the Board of Ed and you didn't put the planner back in, you'd be just about at 1.9.
Right, so you could have not voted the planner back in. You could have left the $200,000 in the education budget, and you could have been at 1.9, which maybe the public approves. Because if they don't approve this budget, God knows where we're gonna be cutting from here.
Can we table this question for a minute? Because I have other questions to ask in the budget.
Well, there's a motion on the, right now, we have to deal with the motion.
Well, just for conversation, there's a couple of things in here I want to talk about.
Can we leave the motion open while she discusses her?
So you could retract your motion, whoever firsted it, could retract their motion, the second would also retract, and then that would give you the ability to move on to any other items that you wish to discuss. So who firsted?
Troy and Bill Pozo.
I want to vote.
Okay.
There you go.
Any other discussion on this? All in favor? Opposed? 3-4.
What is it?
Motion. It was,
I didn't see what you voted, Tom.
I voted yes.
You voted yes to cut?
Yes.
Who was the vote?
No, it was 3 to 4.
Three in favor, four against.
Right,
Wait.
3 to 4.
So it failed.
Right.
Failed.
So who were the votes? I know I voted against it,
So did I.
and so
So
did
did I.
Steve.
Yeah.
All right, so,
So 4-3, well, 3-4.
3-4. Kenny?
yeah, okay, so can we go to page 11? Oh, on the new pretty blue one you gave us.
You have a specific line item you're looking at?
Yes, the insurance is municipal insurance.
2019, not 2019.
Correct. Okay.
So, when I look at the actuals for municipal insurance for 2022 and 2023, we're at 232,206, right? So I'm doing your thing, Paul, where, $500 is $500. The request is 255,000.
Correct.
Do we have a,
Those come directly from our insurance broker.
But do
Your
we-
general liability,
so what was,
going way up, just across the board,
So
across
is-
the state, and that's being driven, a lot of that's being driven from what happened in New Haven, because the bar has been set for liability.
right,
So
but the
high now-
255 is an actual bill.
That is not an actual bill, those are the estimates from our insurance broker. But the increase is being generated in general with the climate of, because of the civil lawsuits that have gone on across the state, particularly with what happened in New Haven, drove the civil award up so high that across the board, everyone's seeing a huge increase in insurances.
All right, then right below that, workers' comp.
Yep. Those also-
22, 195, 23, 177, now we're at 220, no way to get a few dollars out of those?
That also comes from the broker. So I take the brokers as, because they're the experts in the area, and
So how close were the brokers last year?
pretty close. The problem is you don't know what the actuals are gonna be, I just got the email today for the renewal.
Right, because in 23, we had
We don't know the
237, it came out
renewals until
206.
about a week before July 1st. Unfortunately.
Like workers' comp, if somebody gets hurt, you never know if somebody's gonna get hurt, the rates go up.
All right, I'll move on to,
I mean, you could, if you wanted to reduce it a little bit, you could reduce it a little bit, if it goes over, then we gotta figure out where to find it in another line item.
and we have to doing that that
Ken, you
into it.
make an excellent point, and the reason why those two were not discussed in our meeting today is, as Anne Marie said, when a broker, an expert comes in and gives us a number, my past practice is I do go with that number.
Right.
And it's something to be discussed, obviously, next year, if they completely miss the number,
Right.
we'll hold his feet to the fire, but coming in, again, when the expert comes in and tells us this is what you should
Right.
budget, we
What if-
tend to.
Right, if you look at the last 2 years, though, we've adopted a budget for both of those line items that are higher than what they actually were. So I
Yep.
didn't know if we could squeeze 5 and 5.
Because typically what happens is typically the indications come in a little higher. A lot of times, even on the health insurance, sometimes the indications come in higher.
Right.
And then they, as they figure out the market, then it comes in at the actual, but
Yeah, well, that's my other question about the health insurance. You know,
health insurance is a pretty solid number. Brown and Brown has come back to us, and those are based on where we are experience-wise.
And I want to note that a question that came up yesterday, and thank you, Anne Marie, and thank you, Brown and Brown. I asked to look at different plans. I know the state offers a plan. I forgot the name of the plan. We did look at the state plan, which isn't an HSA plan. And, there's a lot of employees that like it, but the cost of it was significantly higher than the current Anthem plan that we had. So we did go out, we did try and price shop to see what we could offer if we could drive down the potential premium.
Right.
And unfortunately, we just couldn't.
So, I think, in general, from our broker, the medical renewal is at 9.9, and the rest of the Winchester groups, I guess including the Board of Education, is at 10.95 of an increase. This is the largest increase we've had in several years.
Right.
And we have some pretty high experience, I think, is what's really driving us. Our loss experience has gone up significantly. However, we are, still lower than, what the state plan is offering.
right, page 9 on the recreation. I must have missed this. I thought we reduced the request for another labor or shared labor.
Correct, the shared labor.
So what's the 44,000 for?
So, in the 2024 budget, there was an error for one of the positions, which is one of the part-time maintainer positions or laborer positions. I'm not sure exactly what the correct title is. And that was somehow in the process was left out of, it was cut and it wasn't supposed to be cut. It was a miscommunication in the actual budgeting process that we somehow missed it when we budgeted. So, and then previously, Jamie's position, her assistant, I believe was funded out of, the team last year, I think. Let me look and see where we landed.
Yeah, it was funded out of the recreational
Correct, it was
money
funded
from
out
the
of
state, yeah.
recreation.
All right.
So
Telephone,
you have two part-time positions that are being funded.
but there's no new one.
There's no new one, no. The new position was the shared maintainer with the public works
But that was
department, and that was cut. Correct.
And then we just funded tonight from the recreation to fund the assistant. So on page 10, telephone internet. Is it telephone driving it or is internet driving it?
Page 10?
I got too many windows open. Hold on a second.
I don't see telephone on page 10.
Well, I'm just asking because this is,
What's the account number that you're looking at?
Yeah, I don't see it on page 10
It's
either.
on page 9.
What's
it's
the account-
under other shared costs, under
Under the 9.
910.
910.
910, on page 10. Telephone internet. I'm just curious
Oh, okay.
in terms of,
Let me
like,
open that.
I thought all the phones internally were now on.
They're POI,
in-
right? Power.
Yeah, what do you call it, POI? You know,
they're-
internet-based.
oh, internet-based.
And so, and then how many cell phones, and what are we doing with that? Because it's up $8,000.
So, Tom did a huge schedule on this, looking at all the spending, all of the line items. We did go through all of the cell phones, and we did get rid of cell phones. month's worth of spending. So this is, you have a multitude of items that go in here. So you have Verizon, you have Frontier, you have Charter, which is TV and internet. We have Epic IO, which is one of our redundant systems, that's a backup system. And we have GoTo, which allows you to send your email to your phone. So there is some redundancy in the phone systems, so that we don't lose our phone service. So we've got, we consolidated a lot of the phones, we do still have some in some of the departments. But within the 910.
Okay, well, you answered some of my questions.
Hold on, I can tell you, so these are all done by the line items. Tom looked at our 5-yearly spend. He did an analysis of our budget, and he looked at where, an average of our yearly spend, and that's where he came up with the $37,000. Up until last year, we kind of left telephone and internet as a line item. We didn't do a good analysis on it, because we did the software consolidation last year, and I said, this year now is our focus is gonna be on the phone, so I think this is really a more realistic budget of where all of our phone, cable, internet, is going to land. So I know that doesn't really answer the full question, but it is all your,
We don't pay for cable TV, do we?
we do pay for internet at certain locations.
Well, internet, yeah, but not cable TV.
No, we do pay for TV, yes, because Public Works,
Senior center.
Fire Department.
Probably senior center?
Senior Center only has internet.
As you can probably
Sewer,
stream
Water,
or antenna.
and Town Hall. Some of them are all sort of, they're sort of combined, TV and
Right.
internet. Most of it is internet, Town Hall is internet, TV combined. Yeah, Senior Center only has internet. And then all of the lines that we have for Frontier. Public Works, Police, Fire, and then all of the shared lines.
Candy, you did bring up an interesting point, and I'll admit that that might be a line item that I didn't truly examine, but when you're staring at a almost 27.5% increase, I think I gotta spend a little bit of time. You know, I would suggest we go forward with that number tonight, but if we could save money, I'll be sure to make sure we can save as much as we can. Maybe we gotta renegotiate some rates. But yeah, when you're looking at a 27.5% increase, I know it's only almost, $8,000, but we were looking at $200 and stuff like that. Every little penny makes a difference. So I guess what I'll tell the board is, give me some time. Let me look at what Tom and Anne Marie put together. Two phenomenal employees, but let me see what they came up with and see if maybe we can save some money. Go forward with it.
We were paying for, I believe, 10, we were paying for like 10 iPads, which I think got during COVID
COVID.
era. And we've knocked that down to 2 iPads because, you're paying $40 a month for service for any cell phone or iPad. So
Right.
we got rid of as much, Terry collected as many of the phones as we could, and we canceled every line that we could.
And yet it still went up.
I don't think the telephone was actually adequately budgeted for. I would say it's more of an inadequate budget in the past versus the cost rising so much.
Okay.
I think we really did look at a consolidated what we need and what phone lines we need and what was and wasn't budgeted, when we moved over. And Mark Douglas was doing a lot as a purchasing agent, and I think some of that was taking different line items. And so we did do a real consolidated look at all of our telecommunications.
Anything else, Katie?
I'd like to revisit the social service director position.
So, I don't know, Anne Marie, if you can look back in the notes and tell us what the original proposal was prior to us making a decision based on what we thought was a grant?
So, yeah, so I can tell you, just give me a minute to find the right tab. So if you were to remove the full position, you would remove the $96,000, and then we would also have to remove the $5,000 from the opioid. So net, you would be removing $91,000 from the budget.
91.
Now, if we move that position to part-time, which is what it was originally,
Part-time, based on the current salary, and this is just at 19 hours a week, just as a throw-out number, you would reduce your budget by $50,000.
and do we keep the opioid money if we do that?
I believe you could keep opioid money because some of the work would be from the opioid.
So you said the net difference would be what?
So, so now in that case, you would just be removing salary, so you would be removing, and salary and benefits, that would bring you down, you would remove just about $50,000.
So you'd be roughly 46,000, and you'd keep the 5, so a net of 41,000.
So removing the full-time position, the net reduction of your budget is $41,170. Because you remove the 50 in the revenue, you remove the $50,000 in the opioid revenue, and you remove 96,000. The net of that is 41,170.
And you're keeping the $5,000.
If you just move it to a part-time position, you would be removing $50,000 from that, from the budget.
From the budget.
You'd leave the 5,000, so you'd leave that in, so you would just take out $50,000. And that would be at the salary that it is, the hourly salary that it is right now. Now, would the hourly salary remain the same? I don't know, because it's a separate contract. It's
So,
not in the union.
so I'm bringing this up because, I don't know if anybody read the paper, but Torrington just hired a full-time social service director. Our social service director is not only working with Winston people, but Colebrook, Barkhamsted, Torrington, Norfolk, I'm sure. So I think we should take that position out, let Paul work with the other towns and find funding between all the towns. Torrington's probably our biggest added numbers to social service needs. So with Torrington taking over a brand-new position, that'll alleviate this position from a lot of work, so, excuse me, a lot of work, so, and I think Paul needs to have discussions with first selectmen's around the area and see if we can get some mutual funding on this. I'm not against social services, I just don't think it should be in our budget alone.
Troy, may I ask a question and ask the entire board, and obviously there's still a learning curve for me. If I live in the town of Winchester, and I'm in need of social services, can I go to Torrington and talk to that social services director?
Yes, you can. That's what they were doing before.
Not from the town of Torrington. You can't just go to the town of Torrington and expect your town of Torrington social services director to service you if you live in another town. If you have a mutual aid agreement, yes, if they say they're gonna charge the town some amount of money to service this. Now, if you're using an agency who is our designated community action agency, and I'm not sure who that is for Torrington, I forget who that is. Is it Community Resources? I'm not sure what the name of it is.
Is it Nancy Canavo?
What?
Nancy Canavo?
No,
I don't know
she's
who.
not.
So there is a designated community action, so somebody who does, an agency that you could go to for your energy systems, and I don't know who that is.
A lot of the stuff, the municipal agent is the senior director. You know, Jen Kelly's the senior director on a lot of this. So she does some of this, the seniors and stuff. And then there's a whole lot of other people with rental assistance, fuel assistance, food, all that kind of
Right,
stuff.
that is doing the
Yeah.
application. That community action agency is the one who actually does that. You typically need somebody you need someone to, a lot of people, you need someone to assist you typically to direct you in the right location. You can't just go to the town of Torrington and say, I live in Winston, can you help me? Typically, that's not how it works, because that person's job is to assist the residents of
Wasn't
Torrington.
that how it was working here? Because that's what I was
Well,
told.
Didn't we,
Well, no,
I thought we received some letters, though, that she's been very helpful in assisting
towns.
people
Well,
from all over the Northwest
And I
corner.
don't know what her purview has been
which I don't, again, I agree, it's a needed service, I don't have a problem with helping anybody anywhere, but if we're constantly helping people, say, from Barkhamsted or Norfolk,
Well, and I think that
it
was
would be
the
nice if they
discussion.
don't have social services to say, look, you've helped 27 people this year, we'll supplement the salary $3,000 a year, 2,000, something, if
And I
we're
think that was
helping.
the discussion that was brought up at a previous meeting, was to going forward, not particularly this year, but for next year, if the position was going to be in, to come up with a, to come up with a fee, like we did with the economic development.
Yeah, a plan
director
for a shared
Barkhamsted.
services.
There was an understanding
I
that that
believe-
person was
I
going to.
believe we
they were
discussed
paying
this with the
us.
dog warden as well, didn't we? Like doing some type of mutual,
That's right, I think that's what Bob was.
services with
was
the dog
talking
wardens,
about,
yeah.
All right. I've worked with a lot of the different groups before we had social services. When we were doing things just before COVID and then during COVID, it was me and Bob doing a lot of this work. Jen Kelly was doing a lot of this work. So we wrote the grant to have a social services director, right? It was funded, it was started out as part-time, and then Josh increased it to full-time, with the benefits and everything. So if you look at the work that's out there, there's no doubt that there's this amount of work. And we did talk about this before, exactly what Troy said about looking at, what do we, it's the same thing with our affordable housing plans, the same thing with everything else, is, as a municipality, a larger one, and Torrington's larger than us, and by the way, their social service director, I believe is all coming out of opioid funds, if I read out of the
I
newspaper.
believe so.
And if it's coming out of opioid funds, it also said it was gonna work with the police department.
Right.
So I think the difference is that, no, we can't just send people down there. And no, it wouldn't be the same, if it is tied to opioid and working with the police as a social services director there. So when you look back at what's happened here with us, has there been better service? Was Josh, did Josh have to spend his time like Bob spent his time doing social services? And he did, because we had all sorts of people that were always looking for help. There's all sorts of things that went to the senior director that she had to carry. So is there a need for it? Yes. Should there be something where we go to the COG or Paul goes to other towns and say, look, in one of the letters we got, and it was just one of the letters, one of the letters stated about helping, I think they use the number 26 for, the other area towns. But when you think about it too, is, the ambulance from Norfolk is here, helping us out. The fire departments come in and help us out. We have mutual aid, we have a lot of things where the little towns help each other out. Should there be a little bit more help in this area? Yeah, I think so. I think when we get to there, if you go back to a newspaper article that spurred a lot of this was, when Canaan and those guys needed a shelter, and they put them in a shelter either in Waterbury, Torrington, or Winston, the Y. So I think there's a lot of issues around it. I've been back and forth on this, a bunch of times. But at this point in time, I think I would keep it. And I know it's tough, and I'll also say at the end of this statement, and as we're keeping these things and whatnot, we could be back here, at the middle of June, and then everything's on the table or off the table, or however you wanna say it. So, I doubt, positions will survive. I doubt the Board of Ed will remain at what we just did tonight. So a lot of these things won't be there if it doesn't pass. But we have to remember what's driving the cost. When you look at 240 for ambulance, it's still in there. We didn't change it, the 240 increase in ambulance. We didn't change the $500-something thousand in the police department. And we still have the $1 million with the schools. And whether it was 800,000 or $1 million, you're still driving, you're still driving 1.8, 1.9 just from those three areas alone. So, so social services, everybody can, look at it how you look at it. I can't, I know the work the Salvation Army does. I know what the work is over at the soup kitchen, Greenwood's work. We know there's still overdoses here. We know that the coordination in the area, we know that Jay Case has been out there trying to get more help for homeless people, et cetera, et cetera. There's, a lot going on, requesting from the state, where probably a lot of this more help should be coming from, quite honestly, is from state, because the state encompasses all towns, not just our town, would encompass everything, it'll be a little bit more fair. I do think that we could allocate a little bit more opioid money to it and be safe. I think we could go from 5,000 to 10,000, or even 15,000, instead of letting it sit there. I think we could take more and offset more of the cost on that, and so that's where I would land.
Would you be in favor, Candy, of making it part-time, kind of a compromise, rather than eliminating the position?
Well, I guess right now I would, no, I would still stay with full-time right now.
There's a full-time amount of work with the position, sadly, because there is still a need. There's still 10 cities where the homeless people are living in the woods off Route 44. Candy said there's still overdoses, there's still, there's still people with housing issues, that she helps them when they can't find housings, and, they're seniors. It's an expense, but there is a need for it, and it's probably full-time work.
There's a need for a lot of things, Todd, and, we had this discussion about another position half an hour ago. There's needs for everything here. And now we're bringing a 2 mil increase. Everybody on this board wanted to have it be a flat increase. Well, that was impossible, as we've come to realize. It sure looked nicer when it was under 2. We had a 1.8 number here for a short period of time tonight. We don't have that anymore. A compromise here for me makes sense, and I'd be in favor of making it part-time. I agree with you, I don't think we should eliminate it, but I think we should look at reducing that budget to some degree, because when we, 3 weeks ago when we had this discussion, the only reason it survived because we got a $50,000 grant that didn't materialize. Had that not been in place that night, I tend to believe this board would have either eliminated it or made it part-time. I think Bob was in favor of making it part-time. So again, I'm just looking to see if we can deliver a below 2 number here, and I don't see any other places to get it.
With that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we remove the social service director position from full-time to part-time.
Is that a motion we can make in this particular moment? I think so, right? 'Cause
See why that would,
Well,
I'll second.
I think we need more information, though, with your motion. What's part-time? How many hours?
What did she say, 18
I
hours?
threw 19 hours.
19
That's
hours.
that's
Why
not-
not, so what makes 19 hours the number? Let's talk about that for a minute.
38 considered full-time?
30 is typically considered a full-time position, from my understanding.
In municipal, 30 hours is full-time?
30 hours, but usually when you have to provide benefits, I think.
I was just gonna ask a question,
30 is
so,
typically benefits.
where does, I don't know the answer, but I will,
It's not a union position, so I think.
where does the benefits line
Yeah, I
up?
was always under the understanding of, but again, municipal, it might be a little different, it was 32.
So what's
Qualify for
practical?
benefits full-time,
I mean,
but
could we
I
have it,
don't
could
know.
this be a 5-hour-a-day position? Although town hall closes at noon on Friday, so if this was 5 hours,
4 days a week.
4 days a week.
20 hours.
Now it's 20 hours, maybe 3 hours on, or how many hours you're open on Friday? What, it's 4 hours on Friday?
8 to 12.
8 to 12?
Well, I think it was 19, because at one point, I don't know if it still is, was a threshold for
I just threw
benefits.
19 just for my calculations.
Because it was
I
for benefits,
Yeah.
because if you go over certain hours, but it's not.
Do we know what the threshold is, or we don't?
I know, in other communities, 19 and a half is always that where a benefit kicks in. I gotta really examine your benefits at all. Are they, we gotta go into handbooks and rule books and all of that. Are there vacation times, are there not? There's all stuff that come into it. I think you're safe at 19, but I think it's important to just put this out there. I've heard the debate, and I just wanna give you a different angle. Again, I respect all of your decisions and whatever you come up with tonight. can you find a particular individual to do that job at 19 hours? Right now, you have somebody doing it at 35. I'm not saying I know what the particular person will or will not do. If that person leaves, we have to now, hire for that position. Do we find somebody that wants to do that job at 19 hours a week? I don't know the answer to that. I heard everybody agrees that there's concern out there. I look at the dollar amounts, and that's what it really comes down to. And I know we were talking about $200, and we debated $200. You all agreed that we should cut the $200, but I just wanted to put that in your head. I know communities where I've come from, I know the need is great out there. It does take a very unique individual that has to serve in that role. You're getting people in their most vulnerable state of their life they probably wish they were never in.
Well, we're leaving this open for potential to be full-time because if we include other municipalities, that's the whole point, so.
Well, that wouldn't be full-time here, though.
They would probably contribute to that.
Well, no, but what we're talking about right now is, you're talking about if we have some kind of mutual agreement with another town down the road,
Right, down the road.
which we currently don't have. So we're talking about what we're doing right now. This position originally was part-time. The person who holds the position originally did it part-time.
Right. So I'd like to amend my motion to add 19 hours to the part-time position.
I'll second.
Any other you good? Glenn? Yep. Any other discussion? Okay, so the motion is to amend the social services position to part-time, 19 hours.
With a net savings of $41,000. No?
50,000.
It's gonna change now. Hold on.
And just so you can debate it all, Ms. Perez did bring up a good suggestion, taking more out of the opioid money. I think you want to potentially view it at the 30,000 and at the ground level and come up with whatever decision you want to come up with.
So 19 hours with benefits would be a reduction of $49,939.
When you say with benefits, is that eliminated?
That is, if you're dropping the salary from the $74,934 at the current hourly rate at 19 hours a week, that brings your salary down to $40,678. So it's a line item reduction just to the salary of $34,256. And then you've got FICA, defined benefit, or defined contribution, and medical benefits that would come out.
So 19 hours still requires the benefits then?
So let me,
No,
no,
you take the benefits
let me
off.
rescind my
Hang on,
motion
hang-
again. And it's gonna be with no benefits. And that takes care of the problem right there.
Wait, let Paul.
Just want to make sure we understand. The way we've described it right now, the 19 hours, do we provide benefits or not?
The number that I'm giving says no benefits.
Okay, so the savings, can you break down the savings again?
Correct.
So we have it?
So it would be a reduction of $34,256
That's salary.
salary. You want the account numbers?
No.
No.
Okay. FICA related to that reduction is a reduction of $2,621. Retirement defined contribution at a 6% match is a reduction of $2,055. Current medical benefits for the person who's in the position right now would be a reduction in medical of $11,008.
Total?
$49,939.
Okay, so the motion then, Troy, would be 19 hours with a total reduction of $49,939.
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Paul? Wait, okay, discussion, Paul?
I was gonna say, if you're gonna do all that, you also probably wanna talk about the opioid money in a potential way of funding that as well. Complete your motion.
Funding the 19 hours?
Well, or as a suggestion that was thrown out there, taking an additional, because right now there's 5,000 in the budget, right?
But you do that as a they
You would
do
do,
that as a
they want to do that
separate
separately?
motion.
Okay.
Yeah, they do it as a
You can
separate motion.
clean it up as
That
separately.
later, yeah.
Okay. I just didn't want to.
So again, so we understand, we're saving $49,939, and there's no change to the opioid money.
Right now you have $5,000 coming from the opioid money to fund this.
Paying for the remainder of paying for the 19 hours.
position.
towards the
whatever,
19 hours,
Towards
right.
whatever, correct. Towards whatever expenditures you have for the social services.
Towards, yeah, okay.
Whether you choose to up that or not, that's up to you. If you want to pull some more money from the opioid money to fund that position even a little further than the 5,000.
Right, so we could make it part-time and fund it with further opioid money.
Correct.
What's the total available opioid money that we have to fund this position? Because now we're back to a whole other discussion.
Well, I don't know that you could use all of it for it, because she doesn't do all that.
No, because it's not 100%.
But what is available to fund this position in opioid money?
I don't know. You guys-
There's
I gave you
criteria
that previously, but
on
hold
what you
on
can
one
use the
second.
opioid money for.
Right, but if we're being
So-
told that we can divert more opioid funds to this, I would just love to know what that amount is.
Oh, yeah, but we'd have to break down what she
And
can do
you
in the
received
position.
that previously. As of March 31st, 42,488.
But we take 5 of it, so that leaves 37.
And we've received more in April, so we did receive, we may have received 25,000.
Okay,
Is that still restricted? The new
all
money's
restricted.
restricted?
It's all restricted to use for opioid mitigation.
so the question becomes, we think there's more opioid money available to fund this position, and I'm gonna ask the question, does that funding from opioid money change if this is a full-time position as opposed to the 19
I
hours?
would say it depends on the makeup of what you want that position to do. If you want that position to focus more on opioid, where it's, say, mirroring something that Torrington is doing, that's working more with the police department on specific opioid remediation programs, that you can say, you could point to saying that they are spending, somebody came back and audited us and said, what'd you spend your money on? We do have to do opioid reporting. I think you just need to be able to back it up. You can't just say, well, it's just our social services director and she services people who have addiction problems. It's meant to help to reduce opioid usage and mitigate the problem. So I think you have to tie it somehow into the position.
Do we have a set dollar amount of opioid money that we get? Is it set no matter what we do, or does it fluctuate based
No,
on the work that we do?
It's a set settlement that we're getting over the next,
3 years, I think.
3 years, and there's several companies.
well, it's more than 3 years. It's like 8 or 9 years
Yeah.
for one of them.
Correct, and then now more being added as the AG's office is setting, was it Target that just
Target,
sent checks, I think, in
CVS,
April? Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we have so
Walgreens,
much.
Walmart, was it Walmart's
Walmart.
checks
we
were,
got a
that must be the
Walmart one.
25,000, I'm
Yes.
shocked.
So-
I think those might have been one time.
So we're looking-
Those are one time.
Hey, we gotta, well, let's sit down and look.
Yeah.
So we're looking at potentially saving $49,939 by making this position part-time. That's the first thing we have on the table here. However, based on what this position does, there may be, or we believe there's more opioid funding available. My question is this: if we leave the position full-time for the total dollars we're spending, is there enough opioid money that would make this $49,000 savings seem fairly meaningless? Does that question make any sense to anybody? Because I'm,
Well, you don't have the remainder, you don't have that full amount between the full-time position. You don't have another $50,000 that you can allocate.
so, but here, all right, so,
To make you back to whole.
so
right?
we're getting 5,000, right?
Yeah.
So if we dedicated this position, left it full-time, and it was dedicated to handling things that it should do as part of the opioid crisis, and you suddenly tell me, okay, that funding is gonna go from 5 to 20, and now we're now we're saving maybe $29,000 reducing this position, I'm saying to myself, well, that doesn't make sense. So I'm trying to get a handle on the math, because if there's enough opioid money here,
I don't know the exact dollar amount that
We
would
could
be
do that.
would
We
be
could
a
do that next
reasonable
year.
amount that
When we
you
know.
could allocate that. I mean, the opioid funds are finite,
Well, it's
a
8
certain
more
number of
years, right? It's, you
right?
said it's
So-
potentially
But-
8 more years.
but-
Do
a
you
lot
have
of things-
leeway to allocate more money from opioid? I would say
But in
yes.
this budget, everything's year to year now.
Right.
You know,
No,
the
I
hole
know.
is,
Yeah.
there's holes, right? For next year, it's not a
But I
guarantee
think
for
what she's
anything,
saying,
so-
Paul, too, is if we had enough to almost fund it full-time, she'd have to be only doing like opioid reduction almost full-time, which would leave her just a small
Which is
time
not
to
what
actually
she
help.
No,
us.
I think you'd have to do, like, you'd have to push more towards the 50%.
Well, there's stipulations, so we have to
Saving
know exactly what those
$50,000
are.
in the budget is meaningful. If it turns out that the way this job is structured, that suddenly we could get enough opioid money allocated to this position based on whatever the position does, and I don't have all those answers, but if that 50,000 reduction was cut in half, then we'd all probably look at this and go, we should leave the position alone.
We could change it mid-year if we get them
I don't think we
funds.
can.
Well,
not?
the agreement with the position as it is, it was funded through grant money. So
Right.
the agreement in the position is if the grant money goes away, then the position isn't there unless we put it into this budget as a full-time town employee. So, I mean, that's,
So it sounds like
That's
there's too many variables for us to really, you know, and.
You could also throw another wrench at you. You allocated $55,000 from ARPA. Could you say that that ARPA is gonna cover the $50,000 lost for the Building Healthier Communities?
but you can't because then you'd have to put it back in as revenue and then you'd have
You
a,
did, you put the ARPA in, you put the ARPA.
right, but it
back
offset the mill rate. The
So-
50 went in and offset other expenses.
Let me,
So no matter which way you do it, you still, unless you take more opioid money, it still is gonna be the same.
Yeah, it's gonna be the same where you're at now.
So
Yeah.
we have a motion right now to reduce this position to 19 hours and eliminate benefits for a savings of $49,939. So that motion is on the floor and seconded. And we are having a discussion about that, and I don't know that we have any clarity that tells us we could find other funding to leave it full-time. So we need to vote on the motion.
if I may, before you vote, I hear what you've all said, and I'll throw out a suggestion. So I don't know what number you want to take from opioid. I know it's a good revenue stream that's coming in. Right now, we have $5,000. I can confidently say if the position remained full-time, you could confidently probably take $20,000 out of opioid money. And here's why. And you can tie this in, and, you know, Anne Marie and I and the rest of the people in the office will be reporting to the AG's office, which they really take a look at in terms of this opioid money, because they didn't want it going to waste. They wanted it to go towards what it should be used for. But let's put a scenario out there. Somebody's heat is about to get turned off and they need fuel assistance. They could be going down a very bad path and they could look to drugs. So although a very tough connection to make, I can easily make the connection that when somebody's lights are staying on in their house or their heat's staying on in their house, they're probably not going to be going down the bad path of potential drug use. They have a home that's heated and lights on. When people are at their most vulnerable state, they tend to do some things that they shouldn't do. So I would feel very confident, as it's probably my signature that's going on that document that's going to the AG's office, that if you all suggested $20,000 of opioid money, I'd go stand in, Attorney Tong's office and fight as strong as I possibly could, that helping somebody with fuel assistance prevents them going down a path of drug use. And I don't think there's anybody that can argue that that isn't a potential
I
possibility.
mean, you also have the homeless, you also have the
All
mental
of it.
health issues.
Yep.
You know, you have and you can also direct the social services director to go more towards the Greenwoods van and she does go over there when the
And can
the
you
vans are there.
potentially, do you have an opportunity to put a program in place, a referral program in place with the police department? Because we had a program in Plymouth when I was in, not even when I was in Plymouth, we had a program in Plymouth, and the social services worker was working directly with the police department, and they would, when they got to, even to a domestic situation, they would hand the social service director's card to that person, or give that contact information for social services to reach out, because that helped to decrease the recidivism of having to go to
And She works with the police department now, I believe.
I've-
But I mean, you,
I've
Paul,
heard
you
that.
would have to, you know,
Yeah.
if we put the more money in, you just have to work with her and work to make sure that we're where we need to be. But, you know, that's, you know, it's what everybody wants to do on this.
And I think it's important to note, and Troy brought up a very glaring thing that I will be looking at immediately, is that if we're fronting the bill, we're all nice people, and we want to help as many, it does, that work needs to be for our residents in this town. I feel bad, but you know what? The other town should be looking at what you all are doing right now. We're taking money, we're going to the taxpayers saying we need to fund this position. We're taking money out of opioid money to fund this position to work with our residents. So I gotta get a handle on that. That's something that's all new to me tonight. It's first I'm hearing it. But rest assured that if you decide, whatever you do with this position, that position is going to focus on our Winchester-Winstead residents.
So if we divert a total of $20,000 in opioid money, which you're comfortable,
I'm comfortable
you
with
could sign
signing
for.
my name.
Yeah. Leaving the position in brings us below 2?
With the 20,000?
Where I have one last question about it, then, where's it, if we're taking another 15,000 out of opioid money that we currently are getting, what are we taking that away from?
Nothing,
Nothing.
we have not allocated that opioid money to anything else.
Just sitting there, just like the NIPR
It's not
money.
being used.
So in summary, before we vote on the motion that is already in place, we could reduce the total expense that was, go back to the original money, what's the total? $96,000, we could reduce it by 20, which brings us down to 76.
So you would not be changing anything. You would not change any, if you were gonna leave it full-time, there's nothing on the expenditure side. The only motion you would have to make would be to allocate additional opioid funds. If you were going
15,000.
to leave it full-time.
You'd add 15,000.
So we give up a savings of 49,000 for a savings of 15,000, I guess is what we're talking about,
Now, yes.
right? Because we're allocating another 15,000.
And then there's still possibility of grants, right?
Yes, there is.
There is.
If we're getting 20, it would be 30, it's 50,000, so it would be 30,000, not 50.
Well, no,
That's
because,
five there already.
no, the total position right now is about $96,000.
Correct.
We cover 5 of that right now with opioid money, so that takes us down to $91,000. We're talking about doing another $15,000 from the 91, which would bring us down to the 76.
Right. So we would save
You're saving $20,000.
$1,000.
That's right. Do you-
$26,000.
So do you want, so it's either save 49,000 or 26,000, and it, now that it's, I mean, that number gets us below 1,
2.
or gets us below 2, sorry.
I wish it was below
my
1.
God.
Oh, me too.
I think there's more work to be done here, and if we just make this motion, save the 50 grand, and then let Paul work on the other half.
Well, that's
with
not,
the
but
other
it's
towns.
no longer a $50,000 save. It's either $50,000 save, the difference, we just said it, the difference.
26,000.
Yeah, you're saving 26,000, eliminating position which services the community. Now, if Torrington's got their own person, I expect our person's gonna be serving our community more so than they have been.
Well, I
So
don't,
that'll lower the numbers.
there's a lot of services in Torrington right now between, you have Fish, you have Friendly Hands, you have the Gathering Place, you have, which I believe Nancy Canavo works at, you got Susan B. Anthony, you got a lot of things that, you got New Opportunities down there. So you have a lot of things that are already working with the community down there.
And they
Huh?
just got a whole,
New Opportunities is the
Yeah,
designation.
so
they just got a whole bunch of opioid money too, didn't they?
Yes.
Like a very large amount?
well, they're a larger municipality, so they're 3 times our size, so they do get it. So I guess I'd like to move the question.
So the question I had earlier, though, was, our person was working with Torrington residents, is that true? No.
I don't know.
Not
I
a
don't
lot,
think so.
no.
I think more of the smaller.
They work, she works in, it's kind of like, they have meetings, right? So like when the shelter was open last year, they would all those people I just mentioned would have a meeting, and they meet, off and on for that. And then they also will call each other, to help solve a problem. So somebody's coming in, you have to remember, we have a shelter. We have the Winstead YMCA is a shelter. Torrington has a shelter, and Waterbury has a shelter. The other communities do not have shelters. So people, if you're homeless, you technically have no home to be, or town to be connected to. So once you come to Winston, now you're in our shelter, you're now a Winston resident, so to speak, right? If you're living in the woods in town, who are you? You know, if you look at schools, and I believe it's the McGinney Act, you know, kids are getting transported from like one place all the way across the state sometimes for school because of that, the homeless act for, within schools and stuff. So it's hard to know where somebody's origin is, but it was a letter, Troy, from Julie Scharnbarg that talked about the other towns that I brought up.
No, there was in our budget, there was a letter from, the person that was doing our social services that.
Kathy Vale?
Yeah, that said
Kathy Vale.
that she worked with other towns.
Yeah, well, she
helped
works with other towns to get
And
services.
I
to
had
people.
it, I don't know what happened.
So
to it.
she would call New Opportunities, she would call, like, there was a person, I believe, oh, you're testing my memories, everybody. She was working with an older man, I believe it was, and she worked with Deidre at Fish about, he was here and somebody there, she was trying to get a bed there, somebody was trying to get a bed here, because, you know, they also work with getting them into into housing as well. You know, so there's a lot of, like, all little pieces all over the place.
Sometimes they also work with the caregivers, so sometimes the caregivers are a resident of one town who's helping somebody else in another town, and that caregiver is sometimes or, you know, they're helping a parent, That
Well, I mean, it's-
coordination
I mean-
amongst all the towns.
So just kind of, so we can kind of put some finality on this. The motion on the floor right now is to reduce this to a part-time position for $49,000. For me personally, given that the savings is really a net of $29,000 with the additional opioid money, I'd vote no for this motion, and I would reallocate the opioid money. So that's my position on it. If you guys want to
So
put it to
we'll close
vote.
discussion and get to the vote.
That would be good.
Motion was moved a long time ago.
Well, no, we didn't vote on the moving, so
All in
it was
favor
just me over here squawking.
So the motion is to vote right now to make it a part-time position.
at 19 hours a week.
Right.
All in favor? 2. Opposed? 5.
I'd like to make a motion to move $15,000 into revenue from the opioid grant.
Second.
Additional.
I was gonna add that, additional.
I'll second.
Discussion? No discussion, all in favor? Opposed? 6-1.
So I think you're 1.9, well, unless you got more items you wish to discuss.
No, I don't need more.
Where are we?
But some of these positions, we've added back in. One thing I'm gonna want is audits and absolute accountability. If we're spending the money on Winston, I want it to
Agreed.
be for Winston.
And
Agreed.
can you give us the
If we
budget
have a
total?
designated job description, I want it spent on that job description,
Agreed.
not freelancing and.
You're not gonna find anybody that's gonna agree with you more. I mean, yeah, these are our residents, these are our taxpayers. They're
Absolutely.
reaching in their pocket.
My responsibility is to the taxpayers.
Yep.
One's foot in the bill.
So your revised total budget, 41,505,616. That is a proposed mill rate of 28.38. Which is 1.99. Told ya.
Got it under two.
Oh, boy.
All right, so item 3, we have nothing for executive session. Moving on to item 4, can I have a motion to move our $41,505,616 budget with a 28.38 mil to town meeting on Monday, May 13th?
So moved.
Can I jump in for a second? And this may be different. I believe what you're doing is you're sending the budget, you set the mill rate after the
Yes.
budget passes. So you stated that it's 28.38.
Right.
I
Just
think you
the-
need to
Remove the
Yeah,
28.38.
I just wanted the record to be clear that you're not
Just
setting,
wanna say it's on the
you're
budget.
setting a budget of 41,505,616.
To referendum.
I just wanted it to
I'm
be, this
sending,
is big.
I'd like a motion to send the budget of $41,505,616 to the referendum.
Nope, town meeting.
Town meeting on May 13th.
Second. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? 6-1.
Move we adjourn.
I'll second that one.
All in favor?
You're going to him, right?
Well, we may have lost our feed there at some point.
I want to commend you for that little exercise you let us through. Oh, really?
Yes.
You were examining facts. And letting the facts lead you to a conclusion.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Can I email that to you tomorrow? Okay. Let me email, because I've marked up mine, so I don't wanna give you mine. Do me a favor, you have my email address, I'm assuming? p.harrington@townofwinchester.org. Can you just email me whenever you get to a computer, which will then jog my memory to send you this email, which then I'll need Anne Marie to send to me, cause I got a paper.
What?
Can you, dear, look at my copy of this, can you email that to me tomorrow, whenever time?
We just usually give Kurt the final, like the final numbers. That's up to you. I mean, if you wanna, that's a working.
It's up to the board, honestly.
It just makes it easier for me, because you guys voted in a public meeting on all those things, so.
I prefer not to give out, but that's me. If you have questions, I prefer to field the questions.
We will get you something in the morning, how's that?
All right,
Sound like a plan?
sounds like a plan.
Good.
The Board of Ed vote, did they, I know it's 3-4, but does that mean they?
It failed.
It failed, so
Yep.
it's still 300,000?
So it's $1 million funding, and we're rounding, $1 million,
Right.
additional funding to the Board of Education,
it's
because it
just
was
the
1.3,
$300,000
and I'm
cut.
rounding, but it's roughly about $1 million.
I didn't catch who voted, how each person voted 3-4.
For what?
For the
Board of Ed.
education, it was me
Glenn would have it, I think.
voting yes.
I voted
cut.
not to cut it, so I
Okay.
voted no.
So now-
I think
It was-
Troy, Bill, and you voted yes,
That is correct.
and I think Candy, Steve, and Bill,
This bill voted.
To keep it.
To keep it.
Yeah, it was Mr. Pozo, our mayor, Ms. Perez as well, and then Paul Marino voted to, I don't wanna say restore, to not cut.
Not cut.
not cut the 200.
Not cut the 200,000.
Right, but Todd, you voted to cut it.
Yes, I
Yes.
voted to cut it.
So Todd, Troy, and Bill Pozo voted to cut the education budget by $200,000. The rest of us did not. That's why I asked when it was happening, what the vote was.
Okay. To reduce the increase.
To reduce the increase, yes.
Exactly. Thank you, Steve.
Yes.
All right, I got it.
People hear
Okay,
it all the
thanks.
time.
I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Katharina I'm the Executive Director of the Winchester Youth
Oh,
Service